At 18 years old, I was arrested for armed burglary. This landed me 2 years in the Florida Department of Corrections. After going through the processing center in Orlando, I was transferred to Lake Butler Correctional, a medical secondary receiving center in Central Florida. Upon arriving, we were placed in a building known as the Honeycomb, a giant structure in the center of the prison covered in cinder blocks facing sideways, making it look like a giant bee's nest. We were assigned 2-man cells, classic bars and correctional officers patrolling, flexing, and talking tough in deep southern accents. As anyone who has done time will tell you, everyone has a story to tell in there. Whether it's rumors about guards, inmates, epic tales of past crimes, or legends of paranormal experiences, you are guaranteed a new one with each wave of new arrivals. Naturally, none are believed, but they're definitely still listened to regardless. And one was the whispers. The story goes that at 3 a.m. in the disciplinary dorm, aka the box, a spirit will torment inmates at night, whispering to them as they sleep, and if you wake up, you will see nothing but you'll feel a presence in that cell. If you lay back down and ignore the whispers, supposedly, you will be injured in some way, shape, or form. Nobody I spoke with had ever been in the box at Lake Butler. Most inmates have never been in there, as most people in the Honeycomb were usually transferred to their main prison in a week or two. I was one such unlucky man, though. You see, I had gotten into a fight with 2 gangsters who were trying to collect protection money from non-gang members such as myself. Naturally, 3 men fighting is not a silent scenario. The guards sprayed us with mace, put us in cuffs, and dragged us to the disciplinary wing. I was given 2 weeks solitary confinement and told that if I was to cause any more trouble that I would have my new sentence tripled. Now, 2 weeks alone with nobody trying to take your food or act tough sounded pretty easy to me, to be honest. In my mind, this was going to be a cakewalk. I still shudder though thinking of just how wrong I was. The first 3 days went without incident. I did my morning workout, ate my breakfast, slept in for a few hours, wake up, eat my lunch, practice my art, read a few chapters of my book, eat dinner, work out again, and finally pass out until morning. This was my decided routine that would get me through the next 2 weeks, until the 3rd night. At first, I genuinely thought that the guard was trying to get my attention for something, so I rolled off the bunk and came to the door, waiting for the slot to pop open so that he could speak. It was then, though, that I could have sworn that I heard whispers. They weren't coming from my door, but behind me. I turned, seeing nobody in the pale moonlight coming through the 4x12-inch window at the top of my cell. Clearly the solitude must be getting to me, I thought, as I shuffled back to my bunk. Now, like I said before, I had heard the stories, but I never believed any of it. Ghosts, demons, angels, and all that just sounded like ridiculous kid stuff to me. As I laid in my bunk, though, I just couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It's not a totally uncommon feeling really in there, as there were cameras everywhere, officers doing regular checks every 15 to 20 minutes, but this felt like someone was in the room with me. But it's not like they had anywhere to hide. I mean, I just had like a toilet sink combo, my desk bolted to the wall with a concrete pillar for a stool, and then my bunk. A quick scan was all I needed to see that I was actually alone. Yet, I still could have sworn that I felt a presence in there. This feeling had me awake now. Lockup had developed instincts in me that refused to let me go back to sleep. Adrenaline was coursing through me as my eyes shifted trying to pinpoint a source of these sounds. First, I swore it was coming from the door, then it shifted to my toilet. When I looked under my bunk as if someone was right near my ear, I heard, "You're not even close." At that, I shot up, searching frantically for someone. I ran to the door and started pounding, calling for the guard. Nobody came at first. Then I heard footsteps heavy storming down the hallway. What's the issue, inmate? You better be dying in there if you're slamming on my door like that. Dude, there's someone in here, I said through the door. Can I move to another cell? I swear I'm not messing with you. Them ghost stories got you your head, boy, huh? This isn't funny, man. Please, you've got to move me, sir. I'm not moving you. Go to bed before I come in there myself and knock you out. All I heard was his boots dropping heavily down the hallway back to his office. But after that was it. Nothing else. The whispers were gone. Not even the cicadas outside were buzzing now. I let out a breath I didn't even realize that I'd been holding in the whole time, and I just kind of mentally smacked myself out of it. That guard was going to tell everyone about the kid losing his mind last night after 3 days in confinement. I just made a spectacle of myself for nothing. Feeling foolish, I laid back down and passed out. The fear having taken its toll on my body, I was out like a light in seconds. I was awoken that morning to a loud noise in my cell. 3 guards were standing over me, looking even more ticked off than I'd ever seen them. So, you think you can just throw a temper tantrum on our watch? Yelled the guard from last night. What are you talking about? I asked as a large hand came across my face, knocking my head into the wall. You're going to clean this cell up, top to bottom, alright? And be sure to save all the toilet paper because I'm not giving you another roll till next week, he bellowed. I looked around and all of my property was strung about the toilet paper everywhere, and my locker door dented as if someone had kicked it repeatedly. The pictures I had been sketching were ripped up and tossed like confetti, and one of my pens had been busted open with a message written on my desk saying, "See you later." I cleaned up the mess and sat there, my head reeling. How had I even slept through all of that? How had someone gotten into my cell? What the heck happened last night? I sat there just stunned until my shower time when the guards came and cuffed me to take me there. See, man, look what all that fuss you made last night did. You went and hurt yourself, said the guard as he followed behind me. I looked at him questioningly. What are you talking about? That line on your back, you idiot. What happened? You catch yourself on the bunk or something? I wasn't there the other day. I turned and in the reflection of the glass, I saw it. One large scratch mark running from my upper right shoulder to the middle of my spine. And then after that, everything just suddenly went dark. I woke up in the infirmary an hour later. The nurse was demanding a confession from the guard. We told you no marks. What happens if internal affairs were to show up and see him like this? He didn't look like this when I went over him after the fight a few days ago. You could lose your job over this, you know that? She then screamed, I'm not covering for you. It was then that I sat up. He didn't do anything to me, I said as I shook the fog from my head. See, I told you I didn't do anything. He just passed out on the way to the showers. Is that true? Asked the nurse. Yes, ma'am. I then turned to the guard, relief washing over his face. Can't I just move cells, sir? No problem. Just promise to act right from now on, alright? Yeah, sure. Deal. And that was my first paranormal experience ever and turned me into a complete believer. To this day, I have never come up with an explanation for what happened to me that night, nor do I wish to go back and investigate, that much is for sure. Since my release, I have never been arrested again and I quit all drug use. I'm now a functioning member of society, I guess you could say. I also have a family now and 3 beautiful children. I work 50 hours a week and play with my kids every day, and do my best to direct them on the right path. And so far, life has been pretty good. I'm a teenager, and it's just me and my mum in the house with our 2 dogs. This is a story from last winter, but I'm sharing it on here because it's starting to show up again, and my mum even started seeing it again as well this time. So last winter, it was around, I want to say 12 in the morning, and like I said, I'm a teen, so I'm awake at night a lot doing my own stuff. I was by myself and I started hearing some banging in the kitchen, like cups falling. This is not my or my mum's first time with spirits speaking, and I grew up in an extremely haunted home, and it got so bad that we had to move from there. But I heard the cups, and I'm usually not the person to investigate, but nothing weird had happened in a while, so paranormal activity didn't even cross my mind. I opened my door and peeked out into the hallway, and I see what looks like to be my mum standing in the corner of my kitchen. I had the view of her back, but what was really strange is that she was completely butt naked. This looked exactly like my mother, though. It had her body figure, her hair, her sun tattoo above her tailbone, everything. Obviously, I was thinking, why is my mum standing naked in our kitchen at 12 in the morning right now? And this person, or whatever was so visible that I literally thought that it was my mother, it was there for a good amount of time, just not moving at all. It's one of the worst encounters in my life, and it still freaks me out to think about it. It wasn't shadowy at all, and it was the most visible thing that I'd ever seen. All the lights in the kitchen and the living room were on as well. So, thinking it was my mum, I just said the word, "Mum." I was confused on what the heck she was doing. And then I hear from my mum's bedroom next to me, that's right across from my room, my mum's voice says, "What?" It was from her room, with her door cracked open. The last split thing that I saw before I just literally launched into my mum's room was it turning around. I didn't see its face or anything because I bolted into my mum's room freaking out. I'm usually used to seeing freaky stuff like this because, like I said, growing up in an old haunted house and all that. But this was just so different. I was in tears freaking out. My mum got a crowbar or something from under her bed and went out to see if anything was there, and whatever it was gone. I slept in my mum's bed that night. Now, this is where my mum's story comes in. About 2 days later, I was still so freaked out by what had happened that I was literally still sleeping in my mum's bed. She is still freaked out by this story as well and doesn't ever talk about it, but she did tell me once that it happened because it scared her so bad, I guess. She said that she woke up in the middle of the night and her bedroom door was cracked open and the hallway light was shining into her room a bit, which was strange because she shuts the door every night. She then says that she looked over on my side of the bed on her left and saw what looked exactly like her, again naked, crawl into the bed with us on my side of the edge of the bed. My mum couldn't move and she said that it felt so real. It was facing the opposite side of her, facing the wall, laying on its side, and she couldn't see its face yet. She said that she could move her hand and she was trying to shake me awake in tears, but I just wouldn't budge. Weirdly though, she said that she doesn't remember anything that happened after that. But she was scared out of her mind all day once she woke up. Apparently she must have passed out or something. And when I first heard this, I thought, well, maybe it was sleep paralysis. But still scary as heck that she saw exactly what I had seen, right? Plus the fact that it had only been a few nights before that. Sometime after that too, we would swear that we would see her for a split 2 to 3 seconds standing in random places in the house. Usually her doorway, or sometimes in her room too. But whatever the thing is, it really doesn't wear any clothes, which is really strange, right? We hadn't seen it since the winter left, but now it's back, and really I don't know if it has to do with it being around Christmas, because that's when weird stuff started happening, well, where we used to live anyway. It was always around October, and it would always get worse until around Christmas. But we hadn't seen this lady at our old home, and my mum thinks that maybe it's her fault because When she was in her 20s in college, she used a Ouija board with a couple of college friends and had a terrifying experience where it had a connection with her, is how she describes it. Let's just say that it got so bad that the words no on the board wouldn't burn in the end. And all her friends who did it, they still have weird stuff happening to them as well. I won't go into that story, but if you guys would like, I can ask her about that and see if she would like to share it here. I'm just sharing this story because yesterday morning me and my mum heard scratching on our carpet from the hallway when we were the only ones home. And it certainly wasn't our dogs because they were sitting in their beds 2 feet away from us and we could see them. Same morning too, my mum proceeds to tell me that she has seen the naked lady again, but only for a split second, but she swears that it looked like her. I personally am just terrified that I'm going to run into her any minute at night again. But what do you guys think it is, and is there any way to get rid of it? This happened in Connecticut, United States in the year 2008. I actually saw this thing twice. The first time that I saw it, it was at night. For context though, when I was little I used to always stare out the window at night that faced a wooded grove that was about maybe 100 yards or so away from the house, and fall asleep staring at the window due to how peaceful the night was in the woods. So one night, when I was about maybe 8 to 9 years old, I'm staring out the window when suddenly I noticed 2 yellow lights in the woods. At first I was confused, thinking that a car was somehow in a tree. But as I stared more, the yellow lights disappeared and then reappeared in the same spot, almost like blinking eyes. As my groggy brain took a closer look at the lights, I started noticing other odd things, like how the tree these lights were showing up in was a little thicker than I remember, and how there was a giant wolf head in the trees, and that the yellow lights aligned with the head to be its eyes, it seemed. This is when I was getting nervous, and I bumped my head on the window accidentally as I was backing away. Well, as soon as my head hit the window, the wolf head turned suddenly towards my window, and the rest of the creature's body started emerging from behind this tree. The body was hard to see at first because it was jet black and perfectly blended into the shadows, but now that it was stepping out into the moonlight, and I was freaking out because this wolf was actually on 2 legs, and the top of this wolf's head was a good 10 feet off the ground at least. The wolf stayed in the tree line, but was still very much visible from my window, and I could tell that it knew exactly where I was, even though there were no lights on outside for it to even see me with. By this point, I had seen more than enough, so I quickly slammed the curtains shut and hid under my covers that whole night, waiting to hear it clawing at the window to get me. Fortunately, this didn't happen, and I stayed buried under the covers until my alarm clock went off the next morning. I never told anyone about it because, although I saw it myself, I just still couldn't believe that it had actually happened. The second encounter happened 12 years later, during a 4th of July celebration actually. So me and my dad were setting off fireworks in the backyard to celebrate, and when we were done with the fireworks show, as my dad and I were packing up for the night, I saw the same pitch black wolf head peeking out from behind the shed with the same glowing yellow eyes. The head was absolutely massive. It was every bit the size of a 3-foot wide window on that side of the house, in fact. When it saw me staring at it, it quickly ducked its head back behind the shed. I told my dad that there was a big dog back there, and he just chalked it up to coyotes. Well, if that was a coyote, then how did it manage to stand on 2 feet, and how did its face take up the entirety of a 3-foot window? To this day, I really don't know for sure what I saw, but it matches the description that has been given for dogmen by other supposed witnesses, so until I see otherwise, I'm going to say that What I saw was a dogman. It was terrifying to see both times, and I never again want to see it or anything like it. A few nights ago, I went to see the Wicked movie with my family who was in town for Thanksgiving. I arrived back to my house at around midnight. I live alone in a shared but divided house with 2 other tenants living inside of it. One is upstairs and one splits the downstairs with me, so there's 3 apartments total. My place is in the back of the house and has a back porch you can enter through after walking up the whole driveway. So when I got home, I sat in my bedroom and did about 20 to 30 minutes of work on my computer. During this time, the house was very quiet and I kept hearing a man's voice continuously talking. Now, keep in mind, the tenant above me is a man, and I know his bedroom is right above mine because I previously lived up there. It sounded like he was talking on the phone, maybe, just because of how long and continuous the talking went on for. I tried to listen and figure out where the voice was coming from, and I just couldn't exactly pinpoint it. But it was either coming from through the ceiling or on the other side of my room, maybe. Now, it must be noted that my bedroom, it connects to the porch with a door that I have blocked with my dresser. There's a main door inside the porch that you use to get into the house, but there's also this strange door connecting to my room. I couldn't make out the words, but because of how firm and continuous the voice was going on, I figured that it just had to be coming from my housemate upstairs. I mean, it's just the only thing that made any logical sense. I just kept on thinking, though. I had never heard a single voice come through the ceiling before like that. I mean, it's not that thin. Whatever, I'm worrying about nothing. After about 20 to 30 minutes of computer work, I got up to go and brush my teeth, feed my fish, get ready for bed, etc. I come back into my room, turn off the lights and get into bed. Keep in mind, it's been about 45 to 60 minutes since I first heard the voice, and I could still hear it. Damn, I thought, my housemate is chatting up a storm on the phone up there. But oh, how wrong I was. After about 3 minutes of laying in bed, I, all of a sudden, heard my porch door creaking along with the talking man's voice. It has a very distinct sound that I knew immediately was my porch door. I crept across my room and put my ear to the dresser or the door that connects to the porch. Sure enough, the talking was coming from inside my porch, and I could hear the door moving and shuffling inside my porch along with it. Well, at that, my heart absolutely sank. All the lights were off in my house at this point, so I had a sort of sneaky advantage to creep around my house and get a view of what was going on. I crept down my hallway and peered into the kitchen, which the porch leads into. Across the kitchen, through the door and in a streak of moonlight, I just see a man with long, scraggly hair sitting curled up in the center of my porch, turned around with his back to me, muttering out loud to himself and rocking back and forth. My fight or flight kicked in at this stage, and I immediately ripped open the door and started screaming at him to get out, trying to intimidate him. Looking back, I probably shouldn't have made myself so vulnerable, at least without a weapon handy, but like I said, I was just in fight or flight. I can't explain my actions in this moment, other than reacting out of fear and determination to scare him out. Anyways, this dude didn't even react to me whipping open the door and screaming at him, not even a flinch. He simply turned his head to the side, very slowly might I add, and said, "My name is Evan." This freaked me out so much for some reason, especially because he still hadn't turned around or shown his face. I said that I don't care and kept cursing at him to leave, and he slowly rose up with his hands up and said, I know, I'm hiding." He wasn't saying it in like a pleading way though. He said it with an almost childlike or playful tone that freaked me out heaps. I hated this. The fact that he kept trying to reason with me as well and act so mysterious while not even trying to turn around to show his face just really ticked me off, honestly. I mean, who does this guy think he is? Eventually, I ran him out of the porch and was just threatening him the whole time. Now, I assumed that it was just a homeless man who was under the influence of something, as I do live in an inner city area and it's common to see homeless people near my street, but I don't know, man. The sight of seeing him on my porch and knowing that he was in there for at least an hour beforehand, while I was sitting right there, just really freaked me out. I was in full-blown defense mode by the time that I'd opened that door, and I wasn't willing to waste any time to do a character dive on the guy. No imaginable situation would permit anyone to be on my porch like that at an hour like that. Needless to say, I'll be double-checking my porch lock every night from now on. It's funny though, because having my room connected to the porch like this, I always had this horrific intrusive thought that I'd hear someone in there one night. And, well, it looks like it actually came true. This happened a while ago when I was 14 years old, but I've been thinking about it lately. My parents had just split up and we had moved into a new house, so it was just me, my mum, and my brother. My mum worked shifts, so I would often walk home from school and be home alone for a few hours. My brother is older than me, so he would have been working too. One night I got home and decided to play on the trampoline because it was summer. I was bouncing when I noticed my mum come into the kitchen with her work bag on, so naturally I thought she was home early. I was excited to see her, so I quickly ran down the garden path, but for whatever reason I stopped at the very end of the path, just before the patio, and looked right at her through the glass back door and into the kitchen. I looked, and I just remember being, well, scared and thinking that that's not my mum. I ran back up the garden path and sat on the trampoline and waited until somebody came home. I waited so long I actually fell asleep in the sun until my mum actually did come home and she woke me up. Since then, I have had some other experiences, such as hearing my mum call my name, or being at my bedroom door but I open it and she's downstairs or out of the house or whatever. She's also said that sometimes she'll hear me sobbing in my room when I haven't been crying. My mum even asks me if I have been crying and if I'm okay. But what are people's take on this situation? I've never experienced anything like this again, but would something supernatural explain what I saw that day and what I did experience? You guys let me know. The following is a true account of my experience attempting an all-night hike on November 18th. I'm sharing it here because I assume that somebody somewhere may have the same experience, or knowledge at least, to explain away the events that I'm about to describe, and maybe provide some clarity regarding what animal I could have been encountering. So if anyone out there has an explanation for these events, then please do share, because what I'm about to tell you, I can assure you, is all real. 2 days ago, I went to a state park a while north of me to attempt an all-night hiking adventure that I thought would be fun and maybe a little bit scary as well, but only scary enough to make for a good story, you know. The most I was prepared for was fighting coyotes over my food, but that was really, really wrong in hindsight. Without boring you with all the details, I'll immediately begin describing what happened. So I got to East Fork State Park in Batavia around 7 p.m. Given the time of year, it was already dark, and I myself am very aware of the effects that aesthetics can have on the body, so I began picking a spot near the lake and cooking my food and all that. I placed a T-bone steak onto my propane grill and began to cook it. However, after turning around to rummage through my pack for a second flashlight, my hand stumbled across something cold and hard. I picked it up and, to my utter confusion, it was the steak that I could have sworn I prepared already. I looked down to see my propane grill running, but with nothing on it. In the woods where your senses are already off a bit, and events that otherwise wouldn't worry you are quite frightening in the woods, actually. I was immediately put off by this occurrence, as I'm not on any medication, and nor do I have any mental illnesses or anything that should have caused this. In an attempt to regain my comfort, I guess you could say, I took the steak and once again placed it on the grill. I stared at it and watched it sizzle. I even waited to be able to smell the steam before I took my eye off it again. I then continued looking for my flashlight, and all was well for a few hours. By this time I had hiked maybe a mile, I would guess. I was moving quite slow compared to normal, and the steak thing was still on my mind, but not too worrying. I came around a bend where the trees began to get more dense and sat lower, when I saw a deer standing maybe 20 yards away, perfectly positioned facing me on the trail. I wasn't worried by this yet though, and actually reached for my phone to take a picture. I wanted to wait for the deer to turn its head, which I assumed it would, as deer eyes are placed on the sides of its head, but before taking the photo, that is. I stood there, making eye contact with this buck for a solid 45 seconds before I began to question things. Eventually, I gave up and I took the photo, and then began to approach the deer to get it to move so that I could continue the hike. As I got closer, however, the deer remained, well, completely unfazed. Baffled, I took my phone out once again and began recording. I approached the deer slowly and was able to get within about 10 feet of it before I heard it exhale and it just hopped off. I was extremely surprised by this behavior, but not yet scared. I continued hiking, and by this point I had stopped thinking about the steak event. For about another hour or so, I was granted a peaceful hike, until I reached an area where the path came to a bald spot in the trees. Looking around was cut short, as the absolutely pungent stench of burning hair and rotting flesh was the only thing that I could now detect. The smell was so incredibly present that I immediately began to vomit, in fact. This is nothing strange because I am typically very sensitive to smells, and my stomach is easily upset too. However, what was not normal was that I kept vomiting. I continued to vomit all over the ground, losing every single thing that I had eaten. I heaved probably about 5 times before then dry heaving another 3. By this point, I was laying on the ground in excruciating pain and even crying. My vision was clouded by tears, but between my forceful blinks, I could see my hands illuminated in a sort of soft red glow, and when I stopped heaving, I looked up and I saw a light over the trees, but with no source for it. Sort of as if someone was holding a really bright flashlight at you from meters away. I scrambled to my feet and placed my hand in vomit accidentally, which is important later, and began running. I had no idea what was going on, but I assumed that I was extremely ill. Between the hallucinations and the vomiting, I was convinced that I was poisoned or ate something that I shouldn't have at some point. I ripped out my flashlight and began walking. The way back was thankfully normal, and besides my horrible stomach ache, I was generally fine, really. However, upon crossing the base of the peninsula that I cooked on, I felt my flashlight get jerked out of my hand all of a sudden. I turned back, unbothered, thinking that the string had been caught on a stick, but I realized quickly that I was in an area of strictly sand, with no vertical or horizontal objects anywhere. Confused by that, I turned back to the direction that I was going and I continued. At this point, I was feeling that kind of fear that you feel as a child when you first wake up from a bad dream, where the back of my throat got that odd feeling. I made it up a rather steep hill eventually and looked back at the peninsula, and what I saw genuinely has my mind in shambles to this day. I saw myself turned around looking for my flashlight. Frozen with confusion and fear, I just sort of watched. The other me searched frantically and eventually fell to his hands and knees searching. I then heard something which I cannot express enough terror with words to convey the emotion that I was feeling, but I watched in the distance as I began to physically rip myself apart. I ripped off my own limbs and began to eat my own fingers. I once again began to vomit, and the stench of the burning hair once again returned. This time I was only puking bile and heaved twice before standing straight up again. Then, looking back at the peninsula, I saw nothing. The hallucination was gone, but that smell remained. I began running and found the trail again. I actually passed a camping shelter with 3 walls and a very slanted roof, which I didn't remember from the journey in before. But the short bridge afterwards solidified in my mind that I was on the right path. I began to run, guided only by spots of dim moonlight on the ground. I sprinted longer than I believe I ever have before, and eventually I made it to the exit, where I immediately threw my stuff into the passenger seat and quickly drove away. I still don't know how to explain what happened to me, and there are many feelings and details that I've left out to keep this as short as I can, but I've tried to create a meaningful degree of explanation here. I'm begging, too, that if anyone recognizes these as symptoms of an illness, or a psychotic drug or something, then please do tell me. Also, if this is something else entirely, then again, please do tell me. I'm just begging for an explanation as to what this all is. I'm actually going to see a psychiatrist tomorrow and have already consulted my doctor about this. If I do have any major updates, I'll be sure to share them with you guys, but I would appreciate anyone's considerations. Please do try to provide me with an explanation of what the heck happened to me out on that hike. This happened quite a few years ago. Back then, I had an affinity for a particular white substance in the form of lines, and one very cold, snowy night, around 11 p.m., I went for a walk to meet my dealer. I had never been to his place before, so he gave me the address to this small 2-story apartment building with maybe 6 units in it. Upon arrival, I noticed several strangers inside. After they had hit their pipes, 2 clearly unwashed guys came over to sit at the dining table while I waited for my G. I've never smoked anything besides weed and cigarettes. I was instantly uncomfortable. I tried making small talk, but I grew increasingly uneasy, giving only short, vague answers. I quickly paid for my stuff, grabbed the baggie, and I got up from the table. That's when one of the guys offered to walk me home. My heart skipped a beat at that, and I politely declined. "Oh, I'm okay, thanks. I don't live far." The other guy stood up. "No, really, we can walk you. We don't mind. We have to get going anyway." That's when my instincts finally kicked in. I became very aware and very scared. I immediately thought, I'm fully dressed and ready to go, but they still have to put on their coats and shoes. If I leave now, I'll get a head start and quickly disappear before they can see me. They said something else as I headed for the door, but I pretended to take a phone call, waved goodbye to my dealer, and I closed the door behind me. I jogged down the hallway to the outside door, and once I got outside, I ran for the street. I decided not to take the fast route home because from the building they'd be able to see me. I didn't want them knowing even the slightest direction that I lived in, if they were really following me. The building was at the end of a street though, so instead of going straight up the hill, the way I initially came from, I turned right and started jogging instead. I kept glancing back, and finally, I saw them, about a block behind, following me. The street that I needed, Stanley Street, it was across the intersection on my left, about another block ahead at a 4-way light. As I approached the intersection, I noticed the corner house on my right, There was an older man sitting on his porch smoking, and I recognized him. He was another dealer that I had met only once a few weeks before when my usual guy was dry. I choked up as I got to his porch and asked if he remembered me. He did and asked what's wrong. I quietly told him I think these two guys are following me, and asked if I could go inside for a minute until they passed. He didn't hesitate either. We went inside, past his front living room and into the kitchen where I explained what happened. He told me not to worry, that I was safe there and I could stay as long as I needed to. Then we heard a knock at the door and I started to panic. He went to the door looking through the peephole and yelled, "Just a minute." He came back quickly and whispered that he knew the guys and was going to invite them in to have a hit. He told me to sneak out through his back door, which was beyond the kitchen, go to the right of the yard and find the gate. This would lead to a side street and I could find my way from there. He instructed me to creep up along the side of his house, close to the shrubs, and check the porch to make sure that they had gone inside. I followed his plan, and when the coast was clear, I didn't jog. I sprinted up Stanley Street and zigzagged all the way home. When I think back on this now, I'm honestly in disbelief at my actions and how foolish I actually was. I thought that I was invincible. I was far too trusting. But I truly thank God for the man who helped me that night, because without him, I shudder at the thought of what might have happened. I truly don't know what those two guys wanted from me, but I'm grateful that I really never had to find out. So my buddy in Alaska, he told me a story the other day. He said that he was walking with his buddy at around 2 to 3 a.m. past the Palmer Fairgrounds last winter, when his buddy grabbed him and pointed across the road from them and said, "Look at that." And over across the road from them was what at first looked to him like a moose, had a long snout, and his friend said that he saw antlers. When it stood up on its hind legs, he said that it was a couple of feet taller than him from what he could see, and he's at least 6 foot tall. When it stood up, he took off running, and his buddy yelled and started running after him. And as they were running, he said that it was running alongside of them on the other side of the road. He said that it sounded like a man running, bipedal in other words, and its footsteps were extremely heavy sounding and sounded like heavy thuds as it was running alongside of them. After a couple of seconds of running, he said that his buddy whipped around and said, "To heck with this, let's fight it." And they started pumping each other up, and they picked up their skateboards to use as an attack on it. But when they turned to try and find it, there was nothing there and it had disappeared. They combed all over that area that they were in, but they never saw it again. When they got home, they both had the exact same story, and they both said that they saw the exact same thing. So, just curious as to what you guys might think this is. If there's anyone in this area or just in Alaska in general, and they have a similar story or experience, I would really love to hear it. So my boyfriend just told me that this happened, and he said that it happened within the last week. Our house is haunted, but this is really freaking me out. So I usually sleep on my left side and facing away from him in the bed, and on one night in particular, I had fallen asleep facing him while he was awake on his phone. He sat up for a moment and looked at me before realizing my eyes were wide open and I was trying to mouth something to him. He kept asking what and huh, but I just wasn't responding. He shined his phone screen on my face and my eyes were closed. My mouth was slightly open, but when he moved his screen light, he saw my eyes open and I was mouthing stuff to him again. He got so creeped out by this that he almost slept on the couch, but decided to just face away from me and fell back to sleep. This whole thing, though, it has me rattled. The stuff in our house doesn't usually freak me out, but this one has me shaken up a bit. His vision is good even in the dark, and I sleep with my eyes open sometimes, and it's creepy, but it's not wide open, and it doesn't stop once the light is on or anything. I don't know what this could have been if it wasn't his eyes playing tricks on him, and really I'm just not convinced that it was. So we live in a house my grandparents bought in the late 90s. The house itself is probably a lot older than that, but both me and my mum and my grandma are convinced that it's haunted. And we also think we know who it is. It's my uncle, I'm pretty sure. He died in 2006. He had a 4-year-old son at the time, and I was 5. So I don't remember him very well, but he was a really nice man, but struggling with substance abuse. I don't know if that matters in why he's here or not, but anyway, we've always just heard things, I guess. Walking upstairs when we're alone, stuff like that. The stair here is the most obvious, but as I said, the house is getting pretty old, so you can hear when someone is walking up and down the stairs. And really, you can't mistake walking for something else like wind or a draft or whatever. But today, I was in my room upstairs when my mum and stepdad went to bed. The bathroom in their bedroom is on either side of my room, so I heard my stepdad get into bed after brushing his teeth. Then I heard my mum brushing hers in the bathroom. Suddenly, though, I heard someone walking down the stairs. I figured that it was my stepdad. My mum heard it too and thought that it was me, so she called out my name, and when I didn't answer, she called out my stepdad's name, and he replied a yes from the bedroom. We all were pretty confused by this, but then my mum texted me asking if I just went downstairs, and I said no. Then I heard her getting into bed, and seconds later we heard someone walking down the stairs again. And she texted me asking if I'm just messing with her, and I said no, that I swear that I'm in bed. So my stepdad, thinking that there is a possibility that somebody had broken in, he walked downstairs to check it out. Once I heard him walk back upstairs, I looked out my door. The stairs are just outside of it, and I see him disappearing into his room. But I saw the top of someone's head walking down the stairs, and I heard the footsteps again. Genuinely, I thought that it was my mother at first, since I didn't see a hairstyle or anything. It went by too quickly to notice, but I just saw sort of like dark hair, I guess you could say. I went to the bathroom and texted my mum, "Do you see anyone downstairs?" And she just replied that she's not downstairs, she's in bed. So I asked, "Oh, it's stepdad who just went downstairs." And she said no, he's already been downstairs and checked. No one should be down there. And that instantly gave me chills. But since it's been a history of sounds, open cabinets, doors slamming shut, etc., I wasn't too scared to see it, I guess. I walked downstairs, my flashlight on and a broomstick in my hand, just in case it was actually an intruder. But I checked everywhere, and I can assure you that there was no one there. I checked every possible place that I could, and there was no one at all. I must say that I'm a bit freaked out too, and it is kind of creepy to actually see something. But I guess what I'm asking is, why? Ever since 2006, things have just happened here a lot. Almost every week there are doors that slam shut, despite there not being a draft, lights turning on, cabinets being opened, footsteps down the stairs. Why can't he move on? Can we actually help? I don't think that this is a case of a bad spirit or anything. I don't know a lot about, well, any of this, but it's 3:30 in the morning, so please don't scare me in the comments under this video if you have any answers. This happened when I was 12, and it was only me and my mum in the house as far as I knew anyway. So I had said goodnight to my mum, went to my room, turned out the lights, and I'd gone to bed. I was lying on my side about to fall asleep when I felt a cold hand touch my lower back and I just completely froze. Then I felt my mattress compress behind me like someone was getting into my bed. I've never been that scared in my life. I couldn't move, not even my eyes. I was just staring at my bedroom door, praying my mum would come to check on me. I tried to scream, but I could only manage a kind of groan, and I couldn't tell if it was loud enough for my mum to hear it. Then, the thing behind me started slowly stroking my back and whispering shush. I have no idea how long this went on for. It might have only been like 5 minutes, but it felt much longer than that, and I felt completely helpless. I tried to groan as loud as I could, and finally I heard my mum's footsteps coming down the hall. She opened the door and poked her head in, and as soon as she looked at me, she screamed. Her scream jolted me up, and I started screaming too and flailing my arms around trying to fight off the intruder. My mum turned on the lights, grabbed me and hugged me, and started saying that it was okay. I looked around and there was nobody else in the room. I asked her where it went and she didn't know what I was talking about. I said the thing in my bed and she said that there was nothing in my bed. So I asked her then why did she scream, and she said that she came in because she heard me groaning, and when she saw my face, my eyes were crossed and my mouth was hanging open and it scared the heck out of her. I told her what happened and she was really disturbed by it. We looked all around to make sure that nobody was hiding in my room, and finally, she decided that it must have been some kind of waking nightmare. But I'm sure that there was something there. I've felt dark presences and seen shadowy figures many times since that night, and this was really the beginning of it all. So we live in southern Arizona and are all staying the night at one friend's house for a birthday party. Her house is known between all of us as the haunted house since we're always experiencing weird things there. But this time, right after the sun had set, we were sitting on the porch in the backyard when one of us yelled and pointed at the chest-high brick fence, saying that she just saw a bald white human head poke itself over the fence. Two of us immediately ran over and looked over the fence to see nothing. We laughed that off, but it was the first sighting of that night. You see, we hung out a little bit longer outside until we decided to check over the fence again, and while we were doing so, we heard scuttering on the outside of the fence out of view. We joked about it, but we also went inside after this. Skip to a little while later, we went outside again, and almost right away, someone saw a head pop up around another fence. Again, we all thought that it was really nothing, but more of us started seeing a head, hands, and part of a back. At that point, we were scared and started going back inside when one friend stayed back and scared the living heck out of us, but she was just standing and looking. We stayed there for a while, now with one friend holding a broom. They lost their broom privileges soon after this, by the way, and we kept seeing small things of white and some of the same things from before. Our other friends, previously inside, they came out again, scaring the heck out of us again, and we all started talking about things that we saw, and also what it could be when we kept seeing things. But eventually, two people heard a growling sound, and it was very clear that they were both freaking out and they weren't faking it. At that, we all ran inside and started panicking, trying to reason with the fact that there was a skinny, bald white man crawling outside somewhere in the dark growling. We ended up just locking all the windows and the doors and double-checking everything, and we stayed indoors for that night, went outside the next day and looked around, but we never found anything. So I've always been very open-minded to the idea of the paranormal, but I very much believe that there is usually a logical explanation. We've been living in the same apartment for 3 years now, and until about 2-ish months ago, everything had been well, really pretty normal. But in about the last 2 months or so, we both have been experiencing odd things. So, I know for her, what she has told me has been the uneasy feeling of being watched when alone and seeing shadows. The really odd ones to me, though, are the noises. She said that she heard kind of loudish bangs, like something heavy hit the floor in another room a couple of times. I too have seen some shadows out of the corner of my sight and such, but nothing I would say is definitely paranormal. My strange experiences have been like one night, I was at home and going to bed early while my fiancé was out. I went into my kitchen and closed the door, and I got into bed. And as soon as I laid down, the bedroom door just flung open, really hard and really fast. I sat up and just stared at the doorway to see if I saw anything, but it seemed like nothing was there. One evening a few weeks after the bedroom incident, I've had zero odd experiences in this time frame, but after getting home from work, I was loading the dishwasher. As I was bent over loading the bottom rack, I felt what was like a warmth on the back of my neck for a split second before it felt like a huge spider was crawling from the back of my neck to the bottom of my head. I freaked out, obviously, for a second, but there was nothing there and really everything was normal. Then, a couple of days later, I was doing some baking and I loaded the cupcakes into the oven. I set a timer on the Google Hub and I went to the living room couch to relax while I just waited for it. I was just browsing through Reddit on my phone and I briefly saw what looked to be a black silhouette of the top half of a head peeking around the corner from the kitchen with the hands gripped around the corner like it was holding onto it. At that, I dropped my phone and got a solid second of eye contact with it, and then my timer went off and it just vanished into thin air. My fiancée bought an old book that belonged to someone like decades ago that she believes from a bookstore in LA when we went on a vacation in the beginning of October, and she thinks that that book is either cursed or haunted. The book was The Ghost of Mystery Airport by Van Powell. There's no dates on the book, but there is an old sticker of a child in very outdated clothes, 1930s I would guess, on a tree, and it says My Book at the top and Buzz Pitkin at the bottom. Outside of that, though, we have had no new things bought or changed. We had some neighbors move in about a month ago, and we recently found out that my fiancée is about 6 weeks pregnant too. Personally, I think it's just stress and a lack of rest from both of us, and maybe we're just feeling paranoia or something. My fiancé is pretty firm that it's something paranormal, and I figured that I would try my chances at asking the kind folks here what their thoughts or opinions are on this, as we both lack any real knowledge of the subject of the paranormal, and could really use some help. On November 25th at 4 a.m., I woke up in a panic. I've been having sleep paralysis this whole month, in fact. It happens every November for me and whenever I'm stressed. This time was different though. You see, I woke up and was able to pull out of my sleep paralysis fairly quickly, but I felt this intense feeling of something staring at me with deep hatred. I sat up fast and looked around my room, something that I never do. Usually after a sleep paralysis episode, I dig deeper into my covers because, well, it's frightening. But this time I felt scared and also in danger. And when I did this, at the doorway of my room was this 8 to 10 foot tall thing. It had a goat head, I don't remember seeing horns on it, and a gorilla body. I grabbed my phone and turned the flashlight on and shined it. I didn't feel brave enough to shine it at its face, but I illuminated it enough to see its body and a bit of its face. I saw enough and I screamed, a long scream too. To be honest, I purposely screamed for a long time so that my dad would come and save me, embarrassing as that may be. Luckily, my parents live with me and my dad did end up barging into my room. He stayed at the doorway for a second, scanning my room, and then ran in. When he ran in, he ran through the demon-looking thing. It grimaced when my dad walked through it, and it disappeared. My dad, he ended up hugging me for a bit before we had a bit of a sleepover in the living room with the cats. I know I'm a 30-year-old female and way too old to have my dad hugging me to sleep, but that thing looked absolutely frightening, and I was really glad that he was there. My dad, he's nearing 60 now and is very into Catholicism, to almost an extreme extent, as he grew up seeing what his grandmother had to go through as a curandera, a village healer. He says that he sees a lot of ghosts and demons too. He always has his prayer music on. He wasn't always like this, but he always said that he could see the supernatural, but wasn't religious before this. He got into a really stressful situation a few years ago, and all of this magnified to where it is now. To be honest, I thought that this was all just religious psychosis. I'm not religious at all, as the Catholic Church traumatized me growing up, and honestly, I was really hoping all these ghosts, shadows, demons that I was seeing was just an overactive REM cycle, or just my mind filling in the blanks. But this goat head gorilla body thing, it just looked so real, and it freaked me out when the flashlight didn't make it go away too. Also, I was awake when I saw this thing as well. I should also mention too that a year ago when I first got into my house, I fell asleep on the floor of my room because I didn't have any furniture yet. I fell asleep to some frequency sounds, and during the night, I must have skipped over to another video or something. The video was a picture of a priest praying with a Bible at a group of people, maybe demons or something. It was a reddish picture from what I can remember, but the sound was a priest chanting an exorcist prayer in Latin. This didn't wake me up, but what did wake me up was something that tapped my foot twice. I woke up and heard that chanting, and it obviously spooked me, and so I turned it off. I was hoping that the tapping was just a nervous tick, like my foot twitching or something like that, but now I'm wondering, well, what about that experience too? Was that also something paranormal or something to that effect? If you have any thoughts on this, then I sure would love to hear them. Currently, I live in the Canary Islands, a place where UFO activity is pretty common. Over the years, various stories have been told, and there's even some evidence of giant orbs around Mount Teide, our volcano and highest mountain in Spain. There's strange metallic objects flying over the sea, tales of diggers coming face to face with supposed grey aliens, and anecdotes of mysterious lights under the sea near coastal towns and cities are pervasive. I want to talk about the latter though. You see, when I was 10, my whole family and I went on a vacation to Tenbel, a sort of resort area in the south, home to dozens of hotels, rental vacation homes, old tourist complexes, and even a very old, almost abandoned vacation development. To give you some context, at that time, Tenbel was already nearly deserted, despite once being a bustling place. The area is located in the most arid, desert-like part of the island. My sister and I used to joke that it looked like the neighborhood of Strangetown from The Sims 2, because it was exactly that, a place in the middle of a dry, forgotten zone. Today, it still has little activity. There are tourists, but not like before. The place gives off desolate vibes, especially because many buildings are old and crumbling. One of those buildings was where my family and I would spend most of the summer, an enormous apartment block straight out of a Soviet-style design from the 80s. This building, it was next to a rocky beach and a small mountain, which was often climbed by British and German tourists. For some reason, they loved it, but from the balconies of our apartment, you could see the black volcanic rocks and the sea, and it was a beautiful view, let me tell you. At the time, I shared a room with my sister and her boyfriend, so sometimes we stayed up late playing board games or just goofing around. One of those nights, I remember going to bed early since we had spent the whole day hiking and swimming in the apartment complex's private pool. I recall waking up to a strange light sweeping across our room repeatedly. Annoyed, I thought it might be my sister with her phone or her boyfriend messing around. The room was dark and a breeze from the balcony made the silk curtains flutter, something that was quite refreshing in the summer. From my spot, I noticed my sister and her boyfriend standing on the balcony, staring at something. My sister clung tightly to him, which was unusual for her. She's always been the brave one. The light swept through the room again, this time dimmer. At first, I honestly thought that it might be thieves with a flashlight checking balconies for witnesses, but then I realized how silly that idea actually was. So I got up and approached them to see what they were looking at. "What's going on?" I asked, annoyed. My sister turned slowly, almost in shock. Her eyes were sharp, like a deer watching a predator. "There's something strange in the sea," she whispered. I thought that she was joking, so I chuckled and looked where they were staring. And to my surprise, there was a pulsating light, like beacons, flashing on and off randomly. I figured it was from a fishing boat, but the light wasn't coming from the surface. Whatever it was way underwater. I could see the greenish-blue water and the shadows of large submerged rocks near the light's surface. "A submarine?" I asked. "It's right next to the shore, though. The water isn't deep enough for one to navigate there," her boyfriend replied, mesmerized by the light show. The lights started to fade, slowly moving further out to sea. Moments later, a final burst of light shot upwards, created a visible beam that extended into the sky, and then it just vanished, and we never saw it again. We spent hours talking about what had happened. I remember feeling scared. I had never experienced something so strange. But what frightened me the most was seeing my older sister's terrified expression. I knew that if she was scared, it had to have been serious. To this day, at 24 years old, I still think about that night. It's burned into my memory. My sister has tried to forget it. She just doesn't want to think about it, or even hear it mentioned. In 1991, I was 6 years old and my family, mum, dad and sister, had moved to a different part of town. Better schools, nicer area, that kind of thing. It was certainly an upgrade from where we were moving from. The house stood out from the other houses in the neighborhood. It was the only two-story house in the neighborhood, in fact, and the foundation noticeably sat up higher than the surrounding houses too. My dad had learned that when the neighborhood was being developed and the land was being leveled and flattened, that they would move up with a big mound of excess dirt, so they basically just built a house on top of it. It was a tri-level house with a 2-car garage, family room, half bath and closet on the lowest level. After living there comfortably for 10 or so years, my parents decided to combine the half bath and closet into a full bathroom. To do this, we had to jackhammer through the concrete foundation to add or move plumbing for the new shower that was going in. Keep in mind too that context is speculative, given that there's no way to know if doing so had anything to do with what started happening almost immediately after we remodeled that bathroom. I guess it's always just felt that way to me and my family. So, the middle portion of the house was kitchen, dining room, and living space with 3 bedrooms and a bathroom at the top level. Within days of the remodel, late at night, my dad's stereo system turns on in the living room while everybody is asleep. I was the first one to wake up, so I went downstairs expecting to find my dad rocking out at like 2 a.m. for some reason, although he's definitely never done that before. Though he was and is quite the audiophile, so I don't know. You never know, right? But as I'm getting down the stairs, not only am I realizing that it's some random late night radio playing, but there aren't even any lights on. I just remember turning on a lamp and going over to the stereo cabinet, turning off the receiver, and just standing there like, what the heck? I was the only one who woke up as far as I knew, but I had a feeling my sister, 14 at this time, was pulling a prank. But when I accused her of doing it the next morning, she was not having it. My parents brushed it off, considering that they never heard anything either. Well, this would keep happening. I'd say probably 8 to 10 more times in the following couple of months, in fact. The same thing would happen every time as well, always in the middle of the night. Stereo would come on and the volume would slowly go up until someone ran downstairs and turned it off. There were times that I'd gotten way too loud before someone made it downstairs as well, and this particularly frustrated the heck out of my dad, because this stereo system was his pride and joy, and he was afraid that the speakers were going to get damaged. My parents, of course, thought either my sister or I were doing this, but before we had even fully convinced them that it wasn't us, other things started happening too. For example, I was standing in the upstairs shower washing my hair one time, and as I'm facing the back of the shower wall, I see a shadow sweep around the whole shower. Of course, I pull the curtain open expecting to see my sister or someone messing with me, but no one was there, and the door was locked too. There were a lot of shadow incidences just like that too. Now, from the living room you can see upstairs to some degree, and we would often see out of the corner of our eyes what would seem to be something quickly crossing the hallway from one room to another, like you would just barely catch a flash of something when nobody was up there. Touch lamps would come on by themselves often. My dad said on multiple occasions that he'd be laying awake having trouble sleeping, and the touch lamp on the nightstand next to him would just come on by itself. Most notably, my close friend and my dad described seeing the exact same person in the house. In fact, they both saw this person while doing the same thing, which was walking into the front door when nobody else was home. Probably a year or so into these occurrences, my dad got home from work one day, opened the front door, and saw a young girl around my sister's age standing at the top of the stairs that would take you down into where the remodeled bathroom is. He said that she looked about my sister's age and had similar blonde hair, wearing a light blue dress with a white collar. As soon as he saw her, she bolted down the stairs. He went over there, checked the whole downstairs, upstairs, everywhere, but no one was home. A friend of mine not long after that would do the exact same thing. We got home from school. I threw him my keys to open the door because I was carrying stuff. He walked in the front door and saw the same thing that my dad saw, described the same hair, clothes, everything. I wish the story got juicier from here, but ultimately we just sort of adapted to it, I think. It was a little spooky at first, but once we realized that it was just a young girl, we were so used to it anyway that it was almost comical. Things kept happening up until the point that I moved out at 19, and the house was sold about a year later when my parents would divorce. One other interesting detail too is that the guy who bought the house did so as an investment property that he planned to rent out. And I cannot tell you how many times I've seen that house being sold or going up for rent over the past 20 years since then. So, did we release the ghost of a young girl after breaking through the foundation? Perhaps a grave was among the mound of dirt that the house was built on. Did something nefarious happen, or was it just an annoying glitch in the Matrix? Regardless, it's always been fun to speculate, but truly, I would love to know. My friend recently explained to me that he woke up in the middle of the night because he thought that he heard footsteps coming down the hallway, and he's alone in the basement. The barn door to his room, it's locked from the inside with one of those cheap swinging metal latches. but he hears that latch fling open and the barn door slammed across the slider and even dented the wall. Then he describes this short, skinny human with huge eyes and said it looked somewhat similar to Gollum from Lord of the Rings. Weak, short, huge eyes, pale, bruised skin. And this thing walks around the corner into his room, and as soon as it passes the drywall that was blocking his view, he said that he and it made eye contact for a second, and the thing lunged at him while he was in bed, in his underwear. He describes kicking this thing away, and at first the thing would just sort of keep coming back until eventually he kicked it so far that it was out of view, blocked by the wall from his point of view, and the thing just disappears. He then says immediately afterward, this 8-foot tall, skinny, all-black humanoid thing crawls out of the ceiling. He says that it began walking in circles on all fours above his bed, until, after less than a minute of doing so, crawls down the wall, that is past the end of his bed, and then stands up at the end of his bed. He said that when it stood, it was as tall as the ceiling, standing at the small space between the end of his bed, the wall that it crawled down, and the wall-mounted TV behind it. The creature, it lunged at him. He described a similar thing with kicking it off and fighting with it until he kicked it into a wall and it disappeared. I'm pretty sure that I was sleeping when he called me just after this, obviously terrified and confused, telling me all about what had just happened and how he wasn't sure if it was a dream or not. Yet, weirdly, he said that the door was open, and he said that he called me right afterward and didn't remember waking up before he called me. Now, we're almost certain that it was not a dream to some extent, as 1, the barn door is like 100 pounds on a track and cannot move on its own weight. 2, the latch was on the inside with horizontal pressure. It needs vertical pressure to open. 3, the wall was dented afterwards, like I mentioned earlier. 4, he doesn't remember waking up other than when he heard footsteps in the hallway. And 5, events like this began to happen frequently after this until, after months, his mum experienced clearly hearing people in the house when she was home alone. Is that coincidental? Well, we don't think so. From the age of 7 to 12, I had a best friend called Aaron. He was playful, always cheerful, witty, and intelligent. His family, they rented a place from a relative of my brother-in-law. His family consisted of his parents, his sister, and him. We always hung out in the afternoons and on weekends. My cousin Aaron and I would get together, and it's worth noting that neither he nor his sister attended school. But we were like the Three Musketeers, I guess you could say. Although Aaron was much more mature than us, not in a bad way, but because he was very intelligent, knew about everything, and had answers for pretty much everything. Everything was normal too, and I have very fond memories of our mischief and games together. I remember that he taught me songs and words in a language that I don't know. He also drew strange pictures, and at his house, there were figures and something like an altar with similar drawings. But here comes the strange part. So, in the 7 years we knew each other, neither he nor his sister nor his parents seemed to age a single day. They remained unchanged. I also remember that once they invited me to dinner, and when he started talking about the moon and its power, his mother and father looked at him with a face as if telling him to be quiet and change the subject. His house was surrounded by a yard and had 2 entrances, the main one and one from the patio leading to the kitchen. At the age of 13, one afternoon, we waited for him to go out and play, but he just never showed up. So, not willing to give up, we went and looked for him. My cousin and I went through the patio entrance and heard him telling his mum that he didn't want to leave, and she said, "You know how it is. We could be discovered, you know that." And they continued talking in a mix of his language and ours. At that point, my cousin whistled and he yelled, "I'm coming." We went to play ball and I was left wondering what they had been talking about. I waited for the right moment to ask him, which was in the late afternoon after the game, and he told my cousin and me something that we will never forget because his voice changed and he became very serious. He told us that his family came from a lineage that didn't age normally like us and that he wasn't really 13. Apparently, too, they traveled everywhere. My cousin jokingly asked, "Well, how old are you, 80? And he replied, 64. I got goosebumps from that, and from there, we each went home. The next day, we went around to see him, but his house was now empty, and there was no trace of him or his family anywhere. In fact, we never saw him in the town again. They just disappeared completely. The question of what really happened, I guess that will always gnaw at me. We all remain with this doubt, and to this day, everyone in the town remembers this kid, so it wasn't just a figment of my imagination or anything. Also, my brother-in-law told my mum that his relative rented out the place privately, but the father's name was Samuel Bassett or Bastide or something like that. I've searched on Facebook, Data's, Family Search, everywhere where I could find a record, and there is no record at all, anywhere, of this family. A little bit of context first. So I'm 27 and male. My parents are out of town for the weekend at a church conference of some kind. They're very religious, but I personally am not. I take care of our animals while they're gone, and I started a new job 3 weeks ago that requires my being there at 7 a.m. This has changed my sleep schedule to where I start getting tired at around 9 to 10 and wake up at around 5:45. My alarm clock is normally set to this too. I do have one cat of my own, and my parents have 2 cats and a dog. Our dog, Black Lab German Shepherd named Daisy, lapdog in a big body, is getting older and doesn't have the best bladder these days. So, I was awoken at around 1:10ish. I didn't look at the time, but it fits the timeline of the night, by Daisy panting at my bedside wanting to go out. I managed to get myself out of bed and downstairs. We have a back room area that leads to the backyard, as do my neighbors. I opened the back door to this area, turned on the light in a bit of a daze, and opened the door to let Daisy out. I came back inside to our kitchen and closed the door behind me. My cat enjoys eating while being pet, so I started petting him. The cat bowl is on a countertop that looks out into the right side portion of the backyard. A little bit of our neighbor's yard too because of the fence, and a clear view of their back room area. We use ours as a storage room for old kitchen stuff and trash cans. My neighbors, they converted theirs into a sort of mini lounge room. I began to get hungry at this point, so I got a bowl of cereal and placed myself next to the cat. Leaning over the bowl while eating, I stared out the window while I waited for Daisy to finish her business. And that's when I saw something. I saw a black figure moving around in the dimly lit, red light room of their back lounge area. At first, I genuinely thought somebody was robbing them. Then I thought that maybe I was dreaming. I looked at the time on the microwave and it was 1:16 in the morning, so I stared at it to make sure my eyes weren't playing tricks on me. And it moved really strangely. Like whoever it was wasn't trying to forcibly enter, but spastically sort of flailing and moving back and forth. That's when my neighbor turned on the light to the back room and hobbled out. Her and her husband are older, and honestly, I couldn't believe my eyes. As soon as she turned the light on, whatever it was just gone. I've seen movies where the person sees a ghost, turns the light on and it's gone, but seeing it in real life is very much a different story. She looked around the room and then looked into her backyard. She turned around and walked back inside after, I'm assuming she saw nothing. but I think she saw something or heard something that made her want to check it out. In any case, I let Daisy back in after she had done her one bark to let me know that she was done. I put the finished cereal bowl in the sink and went upstairs to go back to bed. Before I did, though, I went to my notes on my phone to write down times, dates, and what I saw. I'm very tempted to ask them about it too, but some people are very, very freaked out by stuff like this. I told a past coworker about one other experience that I had, and they visibly looked distraught. I just don't really tell anyone about this unless it's brought up naturally in conversation, I guess. She is also not the best mentally and has recently been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. And I don't know, this might just be a little bit too much for them. I just wanted to share this here with someone because I don't really have friends to share this with, and parents think that anything ethereal is demonic. Maybe it is, I mean, who knows, but it could also be their deceased father that passed away 2 years ago, or something else. In any case, eventually I went over to my neighbors to check in and see if they saw what I saw, and she said that apparently they didn't see anything. She said that she went out to turn off the heater in there, but doesn't remember looking around the room and into the backyard. I must have been in a dream state or something because, I don't know, what I saw looked just so real. I must have been imagining things, I guess, but I just cannot shake the feeling that I wasn't. I live with my wife in a home that we recently purchased around 6 months ago. I have never had an experience like this before, and I'm really not sure what I should do, if anything. So last night at around 3:45 a.m., I woke up suddenly, rolled over, and saw a 7-foot-tall dark silhouette standing over my wife's side of the bed. I flinched and jumped out of the bed, took my eyes off the being for probably half a second, and in the time that I had, it had disappeared. And I can assure you that there was nothing there that could have mistaken for what I saw, i.e. a coat rack or anything of the sort. It was dark, no lights were on, and I had just woken up from sleeping. However, my eyes were adjusted to the darkness, and whatever it was seemed far darker than anything else in the room, like a solid black, as if you drew a solid Sharpie figure on a dark grey piece of paper. The silhouette was very tall, had no details on its body or face, no hair, no ears, no impressions for eyes or anything. It looked three-dimensional, as I could make out a radius around the dome of the head and the neck. It had broad shoulders, as opposed to a lot of similar reports I've seen online. It looked slightly hunched over and was staring directly at me. I say this because it looked like it had a small forward tilt to its head. I saw its full body from where I imagine its knees were. Its midsection tapered slightly inward from the broadness of the shoulders, and from the waist down, it looked like the same. No gaps of shadow between where its legs would have been, as if it was wearing a cloak that sort of draped down to its feet. All a deep, solid black color. Like I said too, I looked at it for about 2 seconds before I jumped up. I noticed it immediately when I rolled over, but didn't understand what I was seeing until after a moment or two. I suspect my delayed reaction was due to the fact that I was asleep shortly before and had to get my bearings on what was happening. I have no idea what it was or what to do, and I remained awake for about an hour afterward before eventually I just fell back asleep from exhaustion. I wake up for work at 6 a.m. and go about my business. If anyone has seen this, or if you have any advice for how I should handle this, then really please do message me. I mentioned it to my wife only that I saw something strange last night and that she should tell me if she sees anything odd in the future. I don't want to scare her, but it sure scared the heck out of me. My husband and I moved into this house that we currently live in a little over 4 years ago. We live on Long Island, New York, in a very old colonial house built in 1907. Ever since moving in, we've experienced some very strange things. The first experience still freaks me out to this day. I left work early as I was sick with a cold that day. I went straight upstairs to our bedroom to take a nap, and after lying in bed for a few short minutes, I heard the sound of someone coming up the stairs. Clear as day footsteps on each step. Now, our staircase has 2 sets of stairs with a landing in between, so whoever it was made their way slowly up the first set, paused for a moment, then the second set. Our bedroom door sits at the step of the stairs, and whatever it was, it just stopped right at our door. I rationalized at first as my husband coming home from work, but that didn't make sense as he wouldn't be due to come home for like another hour and a half. And in my heart, I knew that it wasn't him. I genuinely got such a scared feeling that my entire body stiffened up and all of my senses heightened. Later, when my husband did come home, I asked him if he came home early and then maybe went downstairs again, and told him what I heard, but he said no, he just got home. But he didn't quite believe me, I guess. Well, about a month later, he experienced the same thing. He was home from work alone and laid down to take a nap when he heard footsteps coming up the stairs. He then started believing, and it was then that he started believing that we weren't alone in the house. We had our baby, a boy, in 2021, and one night I was up breastfeeding him. I used to go downstairs to our living room so my husband could sleep as he went back to work after paternity leave. I'm sitting on my big comfy armchair snuggling our newborn who fell asleep in my arms, when I suddenly hear footsteps upstairs. Clear as day again, footsteps in our upstairs hallway. I freeze and listen carefully, knowing that I didn't hear our bedroom door open, so it couldn't have been my husband. Oddly enough, about 10 minutes later, my husband does get up to use the bathroom, and I call up to him and ask him if he was up before, to which he said that no, he just got up then to go to the bathroom. I was really creeped out. I refused to breastfeed downstairs anymore, and I only did it in our bedroom from then on. The last big thing that happened was my mum, who lives out of state, was coming to visit and babysat for us to give us our first official date night out since having our son. We got home after dinner and my mum looked absolutely horrified. She said that she was sitting on the rocking chair while my son was asleep in her arms when suddenly she heard footsteps outside the bedroom door, and then 3 loud bangs against it, like someone was banging their fists against it angrily. She said that she jumped right up and opened the door to check, but when she did, nobody was there. She then anxiously awaited our arrival back and has been afraid to stay with us ever since then. Since then too, we've experienced little things here and there, but it seems like the activity has died down. My son is older now and has told us that the walls in his room talk to him, which creeped us out a lot, but we chalked it up to an overactive toddler imagination. I'm honestly glad that nothing has really happened since then, as it sincerely freaks me out, and I really, really don't want my son getting scared either. I also want to add one more thing too that may or may not be related to what we have also experienced. One day, a few months ago, we were eating dinner with my son, and out of nowhere he tells us, "I played with Grandpa yesterday." So we assumed that he meant my dad, as my husband's father unfortunately passed away several years ago. And when I asked him what he meant, because we haven't seen my dad in a while, he said, "No, not that Grandpa, my other grandpa." My husband and I looked at each other and asked him what his grandpa looked like, and he said, "He looks like a girl with long hair and he had wings and flew up in the sky." My husband's dad, he was a musician and had long hair all of his life. And I kid you not, We were so freaked out, but also sort of relieved, I guess. Like maybe this ghost or whatever was his grandpa looking out for us. I'm really not sure, but it is one of the craziest things to happen to me ever, and really, I just wanted to stop. Several things happened in this house, but I'll try to make this as quick as I can and just give you a few stories, because honestly, I could be here all day. So my brother and I wanted to be roomies again, and decided to move into a cute 2-story, 3-bedroom house. It was me, my brother, my nephew, my dog, and their tortoise. As we were moving into the house, I was putting boxes in the little closet. It was under the stairs, and I was just thinking that this could be the tortoise's little hangout spot. As I was leaning into the closet to slide a box in, I hear a loud, audible growling directly in my ear. I said nope to that, and closed the door. I looked around to see if my dog was nearby, but she was outside, so that was weird. I probably should have known right then that there was something wrong, but I guess I just forgot about it. One unfortunate thing was that my dog just acted really strange in that house, always. For example, a couple of times we would come home from work and she would just be terrified for no reason. We couldn't even get close to her without her whimpering, crying out, and cowering down. Mind you, she's never been afraid of us, and we were never abusive to her, so this was really off. We were wondering if it was possible that the landlord didn't change the locks, or maybe they were letting themselves in and someone kicked her, hit her, or hurt her for some reason out of protecting our home. She is a very protective dog, so she would have barked and acted aggressive towards some stranger coming into the house without us there. Another thing that really got to me was I caught her several times just sort of staring and growling at the upper right corner of my bedroom. Sometimes she would also wag her tail, sit, and raise her paw like she was taking commands from someone, but mostly it was just aggressive growling and showing teeth. It was very odd because she's never done that before or since we left that house. She never showed any of this sort of behavior before or after that house, and I've had her for 10 years. The random growling episodes really freaked me out too because it was just so unlike her. But I tried to tell myself that maybe she was just getting old and her sight was not that great anymore. But one day, my on and off again boyfriend showed up randomly in the middle of the night. We weren't on the best of terms and I was hesitant, but I allowed him to stay the night because he was drunk and didn't need to drive any more than he already had. I woke up the next day for work and just let him stay there. While I was gone, he was just hanging out in my room and he said that he got this really weird feeling, and then my bedroom door just slammed hard. At first I was like, well, there must have been a breeze. But then he explained that after the door slammed, he saw a huge black shadow thing in the upper right corner of my room and stated that this house was haunted, which was really unlike him. He didn't believe in that kind of thing. I'm sure I went pale when he said that because I never told him anything about my dog's weird growling episodes, and of course it was the exact same spot. Normally, I would have written it off as just maybe a hallucination from alcohol withdrawal or something like that, but him pointing to that spot made me realize that I was dealing with some sort of a psycho demon. And then, one day, I saw it. I was just sitting in my room, and from my room, I could see the wall and the banister of the stairs, and I got this weird feeling, which I assume was what my ex-boyfriend felt that day, like when you get bad news and your heart drops to your stomach. And then, I saw this huge black shadow cascade down the wall and the banister of the stairs. I just sat there in complete terror, watching this thing come down the wall toward me. And look, I know I sound absolutely insane when I say this, but it's like I could just feel that it was on a mission and had intentions to get to me and, well, take over me, like possess me. I was horrified, but I went into fight mode. I wasn't a religious person and I had no idea what the heck I was doing. If I'm being honest, I just said things that I saw in movies. I started saying things like, "You're not welcome here. Only love and light are welcome in this home. The power of Christ commands you to leave." And when I began saying that last part, again, it was like I could feel its fear and hesitation, and it started slinking back up the wall the same way that it had come down. A few other things to note too is that all of us, even the dog, were just absolutely depressed in that house. It was like we were all shells of our former selves. We acted different. We had no energy, we had no social life outside of work. I was having suicidal thoughts, and I have never had them before or since then. I was having nightmares constantly. I lost so much weight for no reason at all too. My brother and I were having really heated arguments when we've always gotten along well, and lived together both before and after this house without any issues. We are both very healthy people and never really get sick, but both my brother and I got very sick with very odd illnesses that nobody could diagnose. I was even hospitalized at one point, and the doctors didn't know how to diagnose me. It may seem a bit uneventful to the people listening to this, but man, the scary moments were very scary, but the mental torment for almost 2 years was honestly the worst of it all. It was a daily battle. It's hard to explain, but I think back to that time and I almost want to cry because it's like I can feel the way I felt back then. The depression and horrible negative headspace that I was in, almost like a messed up case of nostalgia. Thank goodness we were able to cut our lease early and leave. And once we moved into a new house, everything went back to normal and we were all our happy selves again. In those based on true events movies, where people move into a haunted house and it slowly drives them crazy, well yeah, I believe it now because I've lived it. I'll preface this with a question. Do you ever get a sinking feeling of impending danger? Because I did, in the backwoods around Solomon Hill, Berkshire, UK. Just a feeling that the vibe of a place is completely rotten, when moments ago it was almost idyllic. So I got the weekend to myself, as my partner is away for a few days. Something that I like to do is go for night drives, and stop by somewhere in the sticks and go for a peaceful walk when not too many people are around. So I got in the car and put in the directions to a little car park in some woods about 10 miles away. As I drive down the motorway, the sun's very nearly set. It looked great, in fact, everything bathed in orange. I leave at the junction and the motorway becomes dual carriageway, which in turn becomes single B road. I turn off into the lane and pass through the last village before a nice bit of hilly conifer woodland looms large in the twilight. I was going here particularly because I heard that there was a nice viewpoint of Reading Town, but in the end, I don't make it that far. Now, I'm going up country tracks, single lane only, so I'll have to pull over to let someone past if they're going the other way. That doesn't happen. No one else is on the road, in fact. The hedgerows give way to the woodland. It's very pretty and I can still hear birdsong in the dying light. Eventually I reach the car park, although really it's just a patch of gravel for turning around, and a forestry commission gate blocks off the dirt track deeper into the woods. In the car park there's a motorhome, although it looks like no one's in it. There's also a dark blue Ford Fiesta EcoBoost with a fella in it on his phone. I park in the corner behind the motorhome and 2 spaces over from the Ford and get out. There's a meadow across the road from the car park, so I walk to that to see if there's a path that may lead to the viewpoint. I've not been here before. No viewpoint, but there is a single deer, which was nice. After that, I cross over again and decide to use the track behind the forestry gate. Even if I don't find the viewpoint, it will be a really nice walk, I think, and begin walking. The man in the little car isn't on his phone anymore, and he gets out. I take a few more steps, but I'm already feeling a little bit creeped out, like a creeping dread is starting to shift in. I look over at the man. There's now a second man, and the pair of them are dressed in dark, practical clothes with boots. They're very tall. They don't say anything to each other. Their faces are made of stone, in fact. I've sort of stopped now. I pretend to be on my phone. I try not to look directly, but out of my peripheral, I catch them taking turns to sneak looks at me. So I look at them directly, and one is just watching me as they walk towards the same path that I was about to head down. I just sort of stand there as they walk by, and they keep looking at me in alternation, even turning their heads as they're in front of me now to look at what I'm doing. They disappear behind some hedges, looking at me one more time before they go. That dread feeling, the rotten feeling, is very strong. I've had this danger feeling only twice before. One time the danger was perceived, the other time very immediate. At this point, I decide absolutely not, and I go straight back to my car and I get in. I can see the men again, and from the car I can see around the bushes, and they just sort of stood there, watching me. The entire time I got ready and drove out of the car park, turning onto the road, they just stood there, watching. Now, I hope that I was just being paranoid, but I think I know the difference deep down. Paranoia makes you jump at your own shadow and feel anxious. This feeling was cold and a solid feeling in my gut. You become hyper-aware of your surroundings, but also the object of your dread, and in this case, it was definitely these men. I just had a terrible feeling about them, unlike any other stranger that I'd come across. But what do you guys think? Was I overreacting, or does anyone else get the feeling that I'm talking about? Have you had it before, and if you have, where and when? Something about those men just wasn't right, and I'm really glad that I listened to my gut. This happened last summer when I, female and 18, was 17, went out with a friend, female and 19, at the time she was 18, for a stroll in the woods. We live near a big forest. So when leaving the forest, I kind of noticed that something was just off. So I turned back and there was a really tall guy, almost 2 meters, standing right behind me, only leaving a little bit of a gap between me and him. He looked very pale, had blue shorts and white stripes on and a dirty white top. He had pretty big and dark eye bags, blondish white hair, and looked like he was in his mid-20s if I had to guess. I instinctively took a step back, and my friend, out of panic, did the same. The guy stood still and asked us if we were interested in doing, well, you can probably guess, and if we were lesbians, and that he would have some nice friends at his place. My friend, thank God, told him friendly enough that we weren't interested, and the creep turned back without saying anything, and left the way that we took to get out of the woods and walked back in. We took separate ways to get home instantly because of both of us being creeped out. I told my older sister when I got home, and her face turned pale while I was telling her. She asked some questions about the guy, and she told me that this guy sounds like her stalker from school time. Apparently, this guy lived in a little village that was near the woods, and to this day, I've been way too scared to go into the woods there again, even if it is with my friends. I just hope that I never see this guy again in my life, and I also hope that he stays away from my sister. Many years back, I dated a man-child, relatively the same age as myself. We got along pretty well. He presented gentlemanly, hospitable, kind, and loving. In hindsight, things escalated quite quickly. We went from being friends to being exclusive within a month. Not enough time to truly know someone, I know that. This story is quite lengthy, and I'll do my best to shorten it without leaving out integral details. So please, do bear with me. we saw each other daily. We mostly hung out at his home. That was fine with me in the beginning, as I'm rather introverted anyway. A couple of months into our relationship, I started to question why we weren't leaving the house, why we weren't going out and experiencing new things and trying out new hobbies. His responses were always cloudy. He always tried to redirect the conversation, thinking that I was truly stupid and couldn't tell that this was an obvious avoidance tactic. That was the point where I started to become curious, though, and from there it all went downhill. Now, I'm not an intrusive person by any means, but considering that he was my partner, I had a right to inquire as to why we were isolating ourselves like this. After some mild questioning for a few weeks, I noticed that he began to create distance. This noticeable change was hard to ignore, in fact, and pretty much confirmed my suspicions. However, I'm not going to make a decision based on assumptions. I'm ashamed to admit this too, but one night while he was sleeping, I actually went through his phone. I still feel pretty disgusted, even though I found like 100% proof that I was the side chick. I couldn't believe it. I still can't. I was with this person daily, and it obviously confirmed why we were so confined to his home. But it was perplexing because she had no idea about me. It was about 2 a.m. when I looked through his phone. There was nowhere that I could sleep beside him for the remainder of the morning, so I quietly got out of bed, collected my things, and I went home. The next day, I believe that he realized what had happened. However, he never contacted me to see why I left. Things remained silent for the entire day, and then I received a phone call later that evening. I confronted him. Again, I'm ashamed to say that I did take photos of the evidence, as I knew that he would try to gaslight me. The fury in his voice, though, was palpable. He did what a usual abuser would do, and blamed me for going through his phone while totally ignoring his infidelity. It was utterly pathetic, really. He had created this delusion that I was going to contact the other girlfriend and tell her all of the wrongdoings, all of his infidelity, lying and cheating, etc. I would have done this. However, while I was looking through the phone, I realized that this girl was very sheltered. She was completely oblivious to what was going on, and I was afraid that he would retaliate against myself and her, and I thought to myself that eventually she would find out anyway. I do regret not informing her. However, my decision was my decision, and I can't change that. But this is where my nightmare begins. He was so paranoid and confident that I was going to contact his girlfriend that he would constantly call me daily and make vague threats against me. I persistently advised him that I would not contact her, that it was none of my business, that she would eventually find out that he was a deceitful, inept brainworm sooner or later anyway. All I wanted was for him to leave me alone and to never speak with me again. That was really my only request. He obviously didn't take my words well, and he continued to harass me. Only a few days later, things completely erupted. His paranoia exceeded levels that I'd never seen before. He sent me a threatening message with the context being, "I have compromising photos of you and I'll release them," as he believed that I would ruin his relationship. I couldn't believe the delusion. No matter what I said, no matter how I phrased it, I even had my mother speak with him at one point, but it was useless. I sent him a message stating that if this was true and if he messaged me again that I was going to call the cops. 5 minutes later, I received 11 messages in succession. A few were videos, photos, and personalized animations of myself. I had never seen these images or videos and animations before. These were taken without my consent. These were extremely intimate and compromising too. Unbeknownst to me, he had cameras set up all around his room. These weren't just threats. These were screenshots of these images, videos, and animations uploaded on various sharing sites. Luckily, he lacked intelligence. He sent me the evidence. There was nothing that I could do to stop the uploads, but I immediately went to the police. They did manage to take some down, however, there were no promises as once a photo was uploaded, it could be immediately archived. This has forever altered my life too. I don't see relationships the same. I cannot be intimate. I can't form strong bonds. I've become apathetic. I'm forensically observant. I have difficulty trusting everyone, even my family, and so much more. In conclusion, the police were rather efficient and treated me very well, which I'm thankful for. I was granted an immediate protection order, family violence order as well. He broke that quite quickly and called my phone trying his best to apologize, begging me to drop the charges. He was so pathetic that he got his mother to ring me and tried to persuade me. I immediately called the police again and they took immediate action. This ended up going to court and I won. It's really not the result that I wanted. However, he did get his name on that good old sex offenders registry list, which is far more egregious than people may think. Nevertheless, this is beyond life-changing, and to all who may have gone through this, I'm really sorry for you and I feel your pain. Thanks for listening to my story. I know it's a bit long, but I hope that it was good and I hope you got something out of it. I guess the moral of this story is to be careful around people who you think you trust. I know that that's quite nihilistic and pessimistic, but these are some of the unfortunate aspects of life. It's quite paradoxical, I know. Humans are social creatures, but many humans, like this guy, are just absolute rats. So, to start this off, I was deployed to Kadena, AFB, late 2023. I was put into on-base lodging along with another body. After working my shift, I went straight to bed. I was asleep for a solid 4 hours until my roommate woke up to shower. I sleep kind of light, so it did wake me up. At this time, it was probably about 4 in the morning, after checking my phone. He apologized for waking me up, but I told him not to worry about it and to have a good day as he left. At this point, I shift my position and brought the covers over my shoulder. Then, shortly after, my blanket that had been over my shoulders was suddenly pulled back down. I was just about to fall asleep when that happened, so I was still fairly awake, but I ended up texting my buddy, who is an E6 tech sergeant, about what had happened, and he was freaked out for me too. He couldn't believe it, but he knew that I wasn't lying. I then called my wife, since she was awake in the States, to tell her my experience, and she didn't like it at all. She was sort of in disbelief, but also knew that I wouldn't lie about anything like this. I've heard stories about being here and it being haunted, but I never thought that I would ever experience anything like this. And it just had to be one of the freaky things that no one wants to experience, right? To those who have listened to the story, thanks for listening, and for those who have been stationed there, do you have any stories that you want to share? Because I would like to know your experience also, and know that I'm not alone. This was over 10 years ago, but I'll never forget it. So my friend, male and 18, and I, male and 17, would always hang out, either skateboarding, playing video games, and smoking weed. We were still young enough that we were hiding it from our parents, and would go out on walks or to nearby forests to smoke. One evening, it was about 6 p.m, and we decided that we would go to the nearby forest to have a smoke. This forest did have some walking paths, and a really cool man-made stair set that was embedded in the dirt of a really steep incline. There was even a long railing made accompanying the stairs. When we arrived at this stair set, it was about 7 p.m, and there was still lots of light left outside. We decided that we would sit at the top of the stairs for our smoking spot. We were chatting, smoking, having a good time just sort of hanging out. After we had smoked a bit, we remained sitting at the stair set, and we both got pretty quiet. Not for any particular reason, but suddenly I felt or heard this indescribable boom. It caught me off guard. However, what really scared me was the fact that this feeling or noise seemed to come from every direction, including from underneath the ground. I remained silent for a moment afterwards, absorbing what I had just experienced. I looked over at my friend and asked him if he felt anything too, trying to confirm if I was just high and imagining things. But he confirmed that he experienced it too, and at that, I felt my stomach drop a bit. As we were discussing the sound, we didn't notice that within about 5 minutes that the whole forest had been shrouded in fog, and it was beginning to get dark. This was pretty strange, we both thought, considering what we had just experienced, but kind of played it off as my friend went to smoke again. Just before he went to light his bowl, though, there was this shrill or scream that shot through the forest. It sounded relatively distant, but close enough to make us freeze. The scream was long, high-pitched as if a woman had screamed, and echoed everywhere. Again, we heard the scream, and louder and more distinct this time. Finally, there was a third scream that tapered off, and then it just went dead silent. We were surrounded by fog, and it was getting darker and darker all of a sudden. And so at this point, we decided that that was enough. We got up, packed up, and we left, both being very uncomfortable with the series of events that had just taken place. We got out of the forest, which takes about 20 minutes or less, and when we did, there was no fog to be seen anywhere. In the following days, we played off the whole experience and didn't really talk about it too much, chalking it up to a weird experience at most. We ended up losing touch with each other later on, and we ended up getting back together several years later for his wedding. And it was then that I brought up the experience to him, and he remembered it just the same, and we both kind of laughed about it, I guess. It still gave me chills talking about it, and having the confirmation that we both experienced the same thing was very unnerving. But as much as the screams were strange, I'll never forget that boom and the feeling and the noise of it. It felt, I don't know, otherworldly. My entire life I've lived in haunted houses. When I was 6, we moved into this nice 6-bedroom house built in the 1900s in the suburbs. When we first moved in, we didn't make a lot of effort to clean out the 2 crawl spaces. We basically just moved more stuff in with it, really. My mum remembers lots of old dolls being in there, though. I wonder if there's an attachment to something left behind, because I never found much information about anyone who lived there. Anyway, it was me, my aunt, my mum, my dad, my grandpa, and my cousins living there. Through the kitchen was my grandfather's room. Through his room was the stairs to the attic, which was enclosed in an L shape. The attic had been converted into 3 bedrooms by this stage. The room at the top of the stairs, that was my room with the tiny door to the first crawl space. To the left was my aunt's room, which had another crawl space. To the right was my parents' room. And sleeping in that middle room was honestly hell on earth. It was really scary, and most of my friends wouldn't stay over because of the things that happened in my room. I thought that I was just having nightmares or something because I'd always see a shadow figure beside my bed. But that turned out to not be the case. So once I was playing school with my cat in my room, and it was getting hot, so the attic was very warm. I went into my aunt's closet with the cat because I was pretending that he was in detention. The door had no lock, but for some reason it just got jammed, and I couldn't get it open no matter how hard I tried. Me and my cat, we would have died in there for sure after a while because of the heat, but my grandpa came to the rescue and he let me out with no struggle. The rest of the house was bad too. I've been in plenty of haunted houses, but this house gave you a sense of, I don't know, like dread. It felt very menacing and evil. A lot of bad things were happening in my family at that house too. I always felt like the house fed off the negativity as well. My cousins would party and have 20 people in their room every night. My parents and my aunt fought about it a lot, and once I had to hide in my parents' room while my half-brother's mum tried to distract me because the party guests were threatening each other with guns outside. The basement, it was creepy too. My dad finished one side of it and turned it into a sort of home bar. My grandfather had antique statues of clowns down there, and we had a projector down there as well, and the PS2. I would sit down there sometimes and play games. Once the lights turned off on me, I would always run upstairs with this feeling of being chased. Eventually, my grandfather got sick and passed away when I was about 8. My dad needed my grandpa's safe code to take out important documents, and for some reason, all of the adults thought that it would be a good idea to basically do a seance in the attic to try to get the safe code, like ghosts can just spit out numbers like that. So my aunt, my mum and my dad and me took our voice recorder up there. My mum was a member of a local paranormal society at the time, so we asked all of our questions, hear nothing with our ears, and then we walked downstairs. We plugged the recorder into our computer and listened through the recording. We didn't hear anything besides ourselves until the part where we were going down the stairs. Then, through our terrible computer speaker, we all hear what sounded to my mum like a laugh and to me like wum wum in this deep demonic voice, almost like a pig or something. My mum then said, no more recording upstairs, okay? The only not terrifying experience I had there was feeling someone petting me really gently while laying on my grandfather's recliner. A year or two later, though, we got a dog. I was still sleeping with my mum, but at this point my dad was always at the bar and slept in the living room. Me and my mum were in her bed and my dog was chewing on a bone at one stage, when the cast iron 400-pound bed frame started shaking violently. My dog's bone flew onto the ground after the shaking started. We called the dog up to the headboard and she came up and laid between us. The bed was shaking for at least a good minute. My mum said that the bone must have caused it, but even then it just made no sense. Later, she admitted that she just didn't want me to be scared, and we checked online the day after and saw that there were no earthquakes in the area, and nothing else shook anyways, so that didn't make any sense. Just the bed. But one night the door was opened between my parents' room and my room, and my mum said that she saw a shadow figure go from the stairs to the crawlspace door. Years later, my parents split and me and my mum moved out and my aunt stayed. Her boyfriend, who was basically my uncle, passed away sadly. My aunt adopted his kids and they live there still, but my blood cousins and my dad have moved out. I eventually went back to visit them after he passed, and he had renovated a lot of the attic, and it felt very different. A lot less heavy, I guess. The entire time that I lived there, I'd race up and down those stairs to my room, because I always felt chased. And my aunt asked me if I ever told them anything to scare them, and I said no and asked what she meant. I'm a good cousin after all. And then she said that both of the kids, they race up and down the stairs like I used to. A few months later, and my dad was thinking about this Komodo dragon print that he bought from some local photographer or whatever. He remembered that he left it in the crawl space, and he texted my aunt asking if she could find it. And when my aunt got to the top of the stairs, it was neatly placed next to the crawlspace door. Mind you, no one had read her text or know where to find it. Heck, she didn't even know where it was exactly. I think about that house still, and I have nightmares about it, and the entity that I am absolutely certain lived in it. I don't think anything as scary as what we went through has happened since at that house. And while I'm not a Christian by any means, if demons are real, then I am certain that that's what this is. It was in that house, for sure. This was in middle school. My teacher was absent one day, and this gym coach was substituting for him that day. I've seen him around the school before, and he has substituted for us a few times. I was sitting at my desk talking to my friend behind me and pretending to do my work, and for some reason, he decided to walk around the room to check if we were doing the assignment. So I turned to my desk and started writing. He goes one by one to everyone's desk, but slows down once he reaches mine. He hovers over me, just staring down at my work. I got a bit nervous because I didn't want him calling me out or anything, but for some reason, I felt his breath on me heavily, which was really grossing me out. He was a frail, old-looking guy, so honestly, I didn't think too much of it. He walked really slow and seemed harmless, but was sort of very passive-aggressive when he spoke to us. I'd always get this weird, sort of creepy vibe from him, but always thought that it was just me. Anyway, a few months go by, and the rumor of him being fired circled around the school. I was curious, so I'd ask around to know what the tea was. And apparently, the same teacher that would sub for my class was actually fired. He was caught trying to touch the girls during practice and throughout gym periods. He even touched a girl, which was soon reported by the student. And he even got caught hiding in the crack of the door trying to watch the girls change in the locker room. He would just sit there and try to watch them, apparently. He finally got caught while doing so, and he was soon fired and kicked out of the school. The news, it made it everywhere. Even on the news, it honestly spread like wildfire. Thinking back on it now, it gives me chills to think that he would watch girls change like that. And thank goodness that he got caught. I guess you just never know people's intentions after all. Unlike a lot of stories on here, I don't have any evidence, and most of the situations happen months, even years, apart. So, truthfully, I have no idea if they are really connected or not. I would love to know what you guys think might be going on though, because I'm starting to feel slightly, well, crazy, I guess. My first weird encounter happened when I was in elementary school. I can't remember what grade specifically, but I was definitely young. My older brother, Jay, and I invited our neighbors Mike and Pay over for a Friday sleepover. My parents ended up hitting the hay early that night, around 9 p.m., so the four of us decided to take advantage of the mainly unoccupied house and play an old game of hide-and-seek in the dark. For reference, I used to live in a one-story house that was built in the 70s, so the windows were really low and easy to look through if you tried to. My window in my bedroom, it was positioned on the side of the house, diagonal from a pesky streetlight that always seemed to perfectly shine into my window every single night. I didn't own curtains, but I did have blinds on my window, and I always kept them shut to try and help block out some of the light. Anyway, it was Mike's turn to count. My brother Jay, Pay, and I, we all decided to hide. I ended up shoving myself into my crowded and messy closet, which had one of those big folding doors. Because of the fact that my closet had 1,000,001 things in it, I didn't fit very well too. The door wasn't able to fully shut. At the time, I really didn't mind though, because it gave me a little bit of a slit between the door that I could peek through. 1 minute turned into 5 when everyone eventually got found, aside from me. Mike was starting to grow impatient, so he asked Jay and Pay to help him find me. That's when Pay, like the genius she is, ended up flinging my closet door open with an accomplished grin on her face. I don't remember much, other than me complaining that she was cheating, before my eyes drifted past her head and toward my bedroom window behind her. I remember my blood ran cold, because the silhouette of a man with a hand literally cupped to the window, as if he was trying to peek in, was enough to scare the ever-loving out of me. I screamed a blood-curdling scream, which only caused Pay to turn on her heels to try and see what had me so frightened. It took all but 3 mere seconds before her screams joined mine, and we both gripped onto each other and full-on sprinted into the living room. I nearly stumbled into my older brother's hands while my parents raced out of the bedroom. I ended up explaining to them through choked tears that there was a man outside of my window. My older brother and stepdad grabbed a flashlight and a knife and checked every perimeter outside. They even went as far as checking our surrounding neighbors' backyards and down the street too. But there was nothing. Nobody. Literally, the street was dead quiet. And, just as a side note, I remember very clearly that it was pouring down rain that night, so it would be incredibly hard for anyone to escape quickly without leaving sunken footsteps in the mud and without the sound of heavy shoes slapping against wet earth. But fast forward many, many years, and at this point, I'm 19 years old and I end up moving in with my girlfriend and her family. Just to add in too, I know it doesn't typically mean much, but the feeling of being watched, always having unknown company hovering behind me, has been a feeling that I've felt for over a decade now. Sometimes I feel like it's just in my head and, I don't know, I'm just sort of psyching myself out. But other times, the feeling just feels so real. Like, I just cannot shake it. Like my body is trying to alert me that I'm not alone. And the more I ignore my body and its warnings, the louder it screams. Anyway, I'm 19 now, like I said, living with my girlfriend and her family. One night I decided that I absolutely needed a midnight snack. My girlfriend had already been knocked out of sleep along with her younger brother and her parents, so I went downstairs, clutching onto the collar of her American bulldog, because, just like so many times before, I felt the unease of not being alone. For reference, to get to the kitchen, you have to come eye to eye with their sliding glass door that leads to their backyard. And let me be clear too that I am 100% certain that night the door was shut and locked. 10,000% certain of it, in fact. I ended up making myself a PB&J when a shiver literally racks through me. I ignore it, of course, and finish making my sandwich and clean up the mess that I made before turning around to head back upstairs. I end up turning just to stare at a half-open sliding glass door. Obviously, I immediately jumped into, oh my goodness, there's a human in the house right now. So I ran over to the door and shut it, and locked it before checking out the entire downstairs. But in the end, there wasn't a single soul other than me and the dog. I literally cannot explain how that happened. Even to this day, it fills me with a sense of just unease. When I woke up the next morning too, I asked my girlfriend's parents if they could have forgotten to lock the door. They stared at me with confused looks before reassuring me that they always double-check that all the doors are locked every single night. Now, this next situation happened maybe a few months later. My girlfriend and I decided to take a weekend trip back down to my hometown to visit some friends and family. Basically, we joined my one friend at a bonfire that was being hosted at her grandmother's house. To quickly explain it too, her grandmother lived on a pretty big plot of land in the middle of nowhere, where the only thing that's surrounding her are back roads, a cornfield, and a thick bundle of trees lining her backyard. Now, my girlfriend wanted to be silly, and decided to leave the bonfire and sprinted a little over 150 feet to lay on her back a few feet from the lining of the trees. My friend and I ended up just sort of staring at her, waiting for her to pull one of her stupid jokes, when we hear an utterly bone-chilling scream erupting from the forest. I have never seen my girlfriend get up and run so quickly. When she got back to us, she was shaking like a leaf with eyes wider than the moon itself. I've been with my girlfriend for 4 years and I've never known her to be a liar, and she swore on specific things that she loved that there was something that screamed at me just a few feet away in the trees. She said, though, that she didn't see anyone or hear anything else. It was just dead silent when all of a sudden the scream ripped through the air, and it sounded so terrifying that it even unnerved my friend's parents and grandma. This third situation happened not long ago. My girlfriend ended up having to work a 24-hour at the fire station, so it was just me, the little brother, and the parents at home. Just like the last time, my grumbling stomach kept me from being able to fall asleep that night. So with a sigh of defeat, I got up and went downstairs to grab some food. When I came back up, I was fiddling with trying to lock the puppy gate at the top of the stairs when I heard, in a deep gravelly whisper, someone whispering my name, sort of all drawn out. I nearly jumped out of my skin when I heard it, and quickly set my plate of food on the ground so that I could pull my phone's flashlight up and shine it toward the other end of the hallway. And again, surprise, surprise, there was nothing and nobody. I was completely alone in a dead silent hallway, so there was zero chance of me mistaking the noise to be a TV or something, as there were no TVs or no noise whatsoever there. I did end up peeking my head into her parents' room and her little brother's room. They were all sound asleep, drool and all. I ended up texting my girlfriend about it that night because I just was completely freaked out. When I woke up the next morning, I read that she texted me freaking out at 6 a.m. because she was changing in the girls' bathroom at the fire station when she heard a whisper, and she explained that it sounded exactly like how mine did, and said hi to her all drawn out like. Honestly too, I cannot even explain what that means or what it could be, but it's safe to say that I'm never going to get midnight snacks alone ever again. Now, this final thing happened just a week ago. I didn't experience it myself, but my girlfriend did. So we were downstairs in the middle of the day talking to her mum. The hallway has the bathroom and the front door is connected to the kitchen, so if you stand in the middle of the kitchen, you can see perfectly down in. My girlfriend randomly lurched forward into the hallway and smacked the wall right next to the bathroom door. I turned around and gave her a sort of confused look because, well, there was nobody there. I watched as she peeked her head into the bathroom, looking like she was expecting someone to be there, when she quickly ducked back out and hurried back toward me. She explained that she turned around and saw the quick motion of a white sleeve or arm moving into the bathroom, as if her little brother quickly ducked into the bathroom to try and hide and scare her, and she ended up catching his sleeve in the action. Yet, her little brother was at school that day, and her father was in the living room with us. In other words, there was absolutely nobody else in the house other than us four, and everybody was accounted for. Like I said, I have no idea if these are all linked in some way, if there's something that's been following me since I was a child. I'm really not sure. I've never seen any figures myself, just have heard very unexplainable things that are definitely real. But I don't know. What do you guys think? I've always had bad luck with entities. I don't want them around by any means, but I've had more encounters than most. And a lot of them, they are just downright terrifying. Though this particular one was traumatizing to say the least. I'll try to keep this as short as I can, as I'd rather not give all the details. So, I was about 15 when I went with my two friends to an abandoned mental asylum. The oldest of us drove us there, and we got the pin from a friend of a friend. I tried to look up where it was located, hoping to find some history, and this place apparently didn't exist according to Google. So I was a bit nervous and had a bit of a bad feeling about this one. We drive down this overgrown dirt road at one point and see a very large building. We enter and there's a lot of medical equipment and beds were still there. We headed upstairs. This place was pure stone, by the way. Nothing was broken or anything, and it was like everything just sort of disappeared. We entered a room which we quickly figured out was an old morgue. We were talking, taking photos, etc. And I remember feeling like something was watching me as soon as I entered that room, though my friends were laughing and telling me to loosen up a bit. When all of a sudden, I hear heavy footsteps behind me running across the room. Honestly, at first I thought I was crazy, but then I noticed that the others had heard it too. We were absolutely terrified at this point, freaking out and looking every which way. I got out my hot pink taser, in which I still have, and started yelling, trying to look intimidating. I remember hearing one of the medical machines knock over and my friend screaming, but my eyes could not look away from the door that was completely dark. I remember hearing those heavy footsteps coming toward us at full speed, and then stopping. All I hear after that is, "Hey kiddo, how was your day at school?" I remember my heart stopping. I didn't see anything, and I didn't stick around to find out either. We ran all the way out without any question. We got in the car safely, thank God, but when we were well away from the place, my friend turned to me and said, "What was that?" I really don't remember what I said. In fact, I don't think I said anything in the end. I never told them the truth that that was actually my dad's voice. You see, my dad died a year ago at that point, and I just didn't know what to think about it. In fact, I never told anyone what really happened that day. So I've always loved scary stuff, films, books, and games, but never believed in anything paranormal. I'll admit that I'd had some weird stuff happen, but I'd ignore it and shrug it off. I mean, there must be a rational explanation. But then, a few years ago, my friend wanted to do one of those paranormal ghost hunts that was taking place in our local area. I thought, you know what, why not? I've watched loads of TV ghost hunts and all that. It'll probably be fun. And it was for the most part. The building we went to had a really horrible history, but there was a big roaring fire and comfy seats, and the atmosphere was cozy rather than scary. They even fed us loads of tasty food as well. It felt like we had gathered around to tell scary stories. Honestly, I never felt frightened once. A couple of strange things happened, and a spirit box clearly said my name, but that definitely wasn't evidence of the paranormal. I put it down to coincidence. In the middle of the night, the investigators got a Ouija board out though and asked for some volunteers. My friend and another person in the group wanted to do it, so I decided to join too. It started spelling out words almost immediately too, and I didn't pay much attention to what it said because I was so focused on watching the other two to catch them out moving the pointer. I wasn't moving it, so obviously it had to be one of them. Except, I was paying such close attention that I realized that there were times only my finger was touching the pointer and it still moved. I didn't understand how and asked to look at the board at the end because I was convinced that there must be magnets or something on there. As soon as it was done, out of nowhere I realized I was really tired, just totally exhausted. One of the people in charge of the group, who said that he was a psychic, seemed really concerned, and I had to reassure him I just wasn't used to being up that hour. I'd been up since before 6 a.m. and it was now 4 a.m.-ish, so I just wanted my bed and chose to leave early. I got home, gave my dog some attention, and I went to sleep. But it was the next morning that I heard some weird noises that seemed to be coming from the door when I was in the bathroom. I thought it was quite weird, but I just sort of ignored it. Probably a draft or vibration from somewhere. I went into my bedroom and started getting dressed for the day. Heard my dog being silly on the other side of the bed behind me. He was a GSD and very big, so he was making quite a bit of noise. Sounded like he was digging under my bed, in fact. I turned around to talk to him and see what he was doing, and when I did, he wasn't there. I checked under the bed and all around the room, but nothing. In fact, my dog was downstairs the entire time. This actually freaked me out because I definitely know what I heard. Over the next couple of weeks too, I checked for mice because, what else could it have been? This is when smaller things started to happen though. From stuff like being certain I saw something move on the other side of the room in the corner of my eye, to strange noises. Sometimes things would just fall, a book falling off the table or a stack of plates clattering on the drying rack. I ignored a lot of this, like, oh, I just heard a plate hit against another plate in the kitchen. Must be a draft in there or something. Other stuff, though, I really couldn't explain. Like, once, I was home alone and I just cleaned around the house and had been chilling on the sofa watching some TV, when I decided to get a drink or whatever. I walked into the kitchen and saw some fruit roll through the length of the counter. The fruit bowl is really tall and, there's no way any fruit would just jump out like that. It was only about a third of the way full as well. Nobody else was in the kitchen and really, I just could not explain that one. And then some things that happened were, well, just downright frightening. You see, I'd been home alone and I'd hear someone walking around upstairs. It was a different sound to the usual creaks, I know that much. More than once, I woke up to my dog standing in the doorway of my bedroom growling. He was never much of a growler, and that really terrified me. I would always go and check, expecting an intruder, but there was never anyone there. The worst thing by far, though, that happened was the last. It was a weekend morning, really bright and sunny. I woke up super early that morning, let my dog outside, and we went back up to bed. I had a coffee and a book, and I was just planning on chilling out for a bit. After a bit, my boy jumped off the bed and looked out of the bedroom doorway, then just sort of laid down, so I went back to my coffee and book. When out of nowhere, there was the loudest crash that came from the loft. I jumped, my dog jumped up, and then it sounded like something was falling down the loft staircase. There was noise of running up and down the stairs, and honestly, it was like all hell broke loose. I could have sworn, based on the noise, that there were at least 20 people up there just throwing things as hard as they could off the floor and the walls, kicking things and running around like crazy. I could hear things smashing, and it went on for a while as well. I was absolutely mortified and terrified, and I could have sworn that there were people up there. I heard running on the stairs but couldn't see anyone, and when it stopped, neither of us dared move. I didn't take my eyes off the stairs, and eventually I went up with my phone ready to call emergency services, but there was nobody there, and the weirdest thing was, it was nothing out of place. Honestly, I have no explanation for any of that. I shared this elsewhere, and someone reached out and told me to ignore it as best as I could and it would go away. And it did, and this was years ago. I'm in the same house though, and recently I've had a few more weird experiences happen that has left me feeling unsure whether or not it's actually gone or not. I have read somewhere that weird experiences can restart any time, and that honestly really freaks me out. But has anyone else had a long break and things start up again? The stuff that happened before just doesn't even seem real to me, but I know what happened. I don't want it to come back, and if there's something that I can do, then honestly, please do share with me, because this is all just a bit too much. So, I had this experience last week. I won't go into too much detail, but my brother, his wife and son were going out for a meal at a well-known buffet in London. Before leaving, they said their goodbyes, etc. Nothing strange there, until the doorbell rang and he came back an hour or so later, which I immediately felt odd about, as the drive to the buffet place is at least 30 minutes minimum, meaning that they would have to drive 30 minutes each way and only eat for 30 minutes. I didn't question it at first. My brother came in when I opened the door and said that he was full, and it looked like he was waiting for his wife and son to come in from the car. Well, so it seemed. Anyway, I turned around and went upstairs back to my room. About 20 minutes later, I got a WhatsApp message from my brother telling me that he's finishing up dessert and will be leaving in 20 minutes. I assumed that he was going out again elsewhere for dessert, as I guess the buffet dessert wasn't good enough, so told him to leave the key out when he leaves so that he can let himself back in. And that's where the confusion came in. He said, "What do you mean? I'm at the buffet and you already locked the door when I left, didn't you?" Honestly, I thought that he was joking at first, and came downstairs to double check, and I noticed the front door was left open. I rushed to the door and locked it immediately, and checked the Ring doorbell app to make sense of everything. But there were no doorbell press alerts and no motion alerts recorded either. Both me and my wife heard the doorbell though, and I definitely let someone or something in. Checking my brother's room after I got his permission, there was no one there or in any other rooms in the household. A week has gone by since then and no other strange occurrences so far, but honestly, let's hope it stays that way. This encounter happened a few months ago. For context, I, 18-year-old male, live about 1.5 kilometers away from a shopping center, or just under a mile. The route that I take usually requires me to turn 2 corners and walk straight for the rest of the journey. Although pretty early on in the walk, there is a tall apartment block to the left of the pathway along the main road. I would say it was about 4 or 5 levels, and you had to pass it too. Now, I live in a shady area, and previously the apartment block, it had a case of a stabbing that killed a woman a year before my story takes place. I even witnessed the cleanup crews hosing the area down when that happened. It was pretty horrific if you ask me. But this caused me to be pretty wary of the area in general. On this day in particular, I needed to go to the shopping center to pick up a couple of supplies. I noticed as I started walking the pathway of the straight road that the sky was pretty dark that evening. It was early in the afternoon, so this meant that a storm was probably on the way. Not a drop of rain fell as I made my way to the shop though. Once I had arrived, I picked up what I needed and went window shopping for a while. When I was satisfied, I exited through the door that I had originally entered and began walking back home. I made it to the final set of traffic lights that was probably about a 7-minute walk away from my house. The rain started to trickle at first, and then after that it poured pretty heavily. 3 minutes later, I could see the apartment block about 20 meters ahead to the right. The rain was still pouring down, and so the visibility wasn't that great. But what I could make out was a man in a dark green poncho. He had the hood of the poncho over his head and a big grin on his face for some reason. As I got closer and closer to him, I didn't like the feeling that I was getting. All of a sudden, too, he reached his arms out almost as if he was attempting to bring me into his embrace, keeping that same smile he had before. The man was about 5 meters distance from me when I took the opportunity to cross onto the median strip of the main road. I noticed his glance followed me as I crossed into the middle grassy patch, and even though there was no traffic, he decided not to chase me down and continued walking along the pathway as he kept eye contact with me. Eventually I got inside and he must have left after some time because I didn't see him again. The thought though of what might have happened if I had walked into his arms still frightens me today. Even if he didn't mean any harm and was not trying to grab me, I still didn't like the vibe that I got from this guy. And when I reached the middle of the road, I definitely felt safer and relieved, especially considering that he didn't attempt to follow behind me or whatever. But I don't know, I definitely am going to be keeping my head on a swivel for quite some time after this because something tells me that this may not be over. During a university trip to a ski resort, me and some friends went to watch the stars one night. We were all part of the astronomy club, and we wanted to note down some key information that we wouldn't have seen with the bright city lights. It was our first year at the university, and we went to the forest, which was still pretty close to the skiing place. We took some pictures and noted some things down until our legs got cold, so we decided to go back. Two of my friends, Steve and Bob, they fell down, grabbing us thanks to instinct, which led us all to fall down as well. Note, we crossed the barrier at this point, and that's why we kept falling. We were rolling, but since our hands and arms were cold and we ourselves are pretty tired, we really couldn't move despite our best attempts. After a while, we dropped to this unused ski trail that was double black diamond. We later learned that the trail was actually abandoned, but didn't know it at the time. And as we stood up, we all distinctly remember being watched. Time also seemed to go really fast somehow, but that's probably because we were tired and the place was pretty calm. But we walked around the trail, and then we heard the scream of a man. At first we thought that somebody had tripped like we did, so we ran to help them, yelling for them. There was no response, but no response ever came from the man, other than screaming, moaning, groaning, and crying. We yelled again, but the man never responded. As we closed the distance, some of us became a bit nervous and tried to back off a bit, because we were thinking that the man might hurt us. But as we walked just a few steps closer, we saw the shadow of a 30-ish-year-old man weeping. We were probably maybe 20 meters away now, but that man was honestly one of the most terrifying things that I'd ever seen. Doing nothing but crying out there in the snow with nothing but a jacket on and a pair of sweatpants. As soon as we saw him, we just booked it as fast as we could, holding back the pain. We spent a good 30 minutes reclimbing that cliff, and when we finished, we quickly ran back to our rooms. We reported the incident to the police, but I never heard back the response about anything. But it was legitimately one of the most terrifying things that has ever happened to me, or my group of friends. I still have no idea what that guy was doing out there, so underdressed like that as well. But all I do remember is that the whole thing felt like it was maybe 5 minutes. And while my memory is not the best, I do remember that what felt like 5 minutes wandering around ended up being almost 15 minutes outside. Like, we found it hard to account for the time that had passed. It was strange, and I still really don't have an explanation for any of it. What I will never forget is hearing the screams and the moans coming from that guy out in the dark of the night, where really nobody should be. My husband and I have been together since we were 16. We're now 24 with 2 kids, and this all started before I met him. His stepmom came into the picture when he was around 13 and brought with her what my husband described as a satanic book. It gave everyone the creeps, and my significant other's dad decided to burn it, which resulted in ear-piercing screams when it hit the fire, apparently. After that, they started experiencing strange activity, such as items being moved. The most unexplainable was a laundry hamper that was found on the top of their roof. His sister also had an experience being woken up to a black figure hovering over her, choking her. Her boyfriend at the time witnessed this too. When my husband and I got together, I spent many nights with him, but whenever I did, I always had a bad feeling over there. But what changed me from a skeptic to a believer was when I placed my phone on the TV stand, and not even a minute later, my significant other and I watched my phone fall from the ceiling in the corner of the room. Anyway, we moved into our first apartment together in 2018. Whatever it was followed us, and the activity went from sparse to almost daily. Unexplained footsteps, items not being where they should be, cabinets opening and slamming shut, doors opening and closing. We moved in 2019, and we were followed by whatever this was again. Nothing about the type of activity changed, but this is when it started showing itself to us. The first time, my husband and I were relaxing on the couch, which faced towards our dining area. The kitchen was behind the wall of where we had our TV set up, and I'm really not sure what compelled me to stop our conversation and look in that direction, but what I saw chills me to this day. Peeking out from behind the wall that separates the living room and the kitchen was a shadow figure of a tall man. It stayed long enough for me to get a really good look at it too, and know without a doubt that it wasn't my imagination. As soon as if it noticed that I saw it, it pulled itself back behind the wall though. During that moment, I was more curious than afraid, and I pursued it in fact. But when I got around the corner, there was nothing in the kitchen. When I think about it now, I wonder just how many times this thing was spying on us in fact. And also, why would it pull itself back into the kitchen instead of disappear right there? Did it want me to follow it? In any case, shortly after this incident, my daughter was born. The activity, unfortunately, got worse again. It became a nightly occurrence that her door would open by itself. This also happened during her naps even. Not only was my husband now seeing this figure too, but it also started touching us and even being vocal. One night, while laying in bed, I dropped my phone off the bed, and while leaning down to grab it, I felt a hand stroke my arm. I'd also often feel like my husband was getting into bed with me and hear breathing in my ear, only to roll over to find myself alone. My husband, he also had his foot grabbed one night while playing video games. Night was when most of the activity happened. Our daughter was waking up screaming over 20 times a night. Her doctor said that it was the worst sleep regression that she's ever heard of. We moved again though in 2021. Our very first night being there, I was unpacking in the kitchen while my husband was putting our daughter down for bed. I turned around to see a huge shadow of a man go from one end of the kitchen to the other and disappear. Another night, we were woken up to banging on our walls, which faded out into tapping. This was a wall that separated our room from our daughter's room. My husband decided to tap back at that point, and the tapping would repeat every pattern that my husband did. We let our daughter sleep in our room that night, and when we woke her up, she pointed to the doorway and told us that there was a man there. We moved again in 2022, our current residence, and I'm not sure what has changed, but the activity comes and goes now. Sometimes there will be very little activity for months, and then it's a sort of rush of seeing figures, doors opening and closing in front of us, etc. I can say that this activity does pick up during stressful times. Our daughter is now 4 and will occasionally bring up the shadow that visits during the night. It's never harmed us, which I'm thankful for, and we've lived with this for so long that it's more like a noisy roommate at this point. But my question is, do we continue to coexist? Or should we get answers and try to remove it? Should we ignore it? Or should we do something about it? What do you think? I'll preface this story by saying that I work graveyard shift at a hospital laboratory, so I'm no stranger to weird, unexplained things happening. However, this experience, well, it happened in my own bedroom a few nights ago. So, generally sticking to my same night shift schedule, I typically find myself going to bed rather late, even on my days off. Monday night, I went to bed at around 3-ish. My girlfriend and cat had already been sleeping in bed. Sometime after I had fallen asleep, I remember my cat jumping up very fast like he had been startled. He did this 1 or 2 times, and I just rolled over and went back to sleep because cats are weird, right? Well, after he had done it a 3rd time, I sat up in bed myself half asleep to check on him and comfort him, and he just wouldn't come to me, which was odd for him. I can remember seeing his distinct shadow on the edge of the bed looking at me, but I had to reach to pet him and he wouldn't move. After this, I laid back down on my side, facing away from the corner of the bed that he was sitting on, and I started to go back to sleep when I heard the deepest guttural mumbling, or growling is the best way that I can explain it, that I had ever heard. I can't remember if it was words or maybe just mumbling, but it sounded like those voice changes that people use on documentaries when they're interviewing anonymous people, and it was super deep. Now, I am not easily freaked out over paranormal stuff. In fact, I kind of enjoy it. But this was something else, and it sent the most insane chills down my spine that I essentially just laid there frozen. I didn't even turn around to look. I just went to bed and acted like I didn't hear it. Now, I don't know if this was some auditory hallucination since I was sort of half asleep or what, but it was an interesting experience to say the least. My girlfriend doesn't remember anything from that night. She slept through it all. But it was so clear sounding and very forward sounding, like it was coming right from the opposite corner of the bed over my shoulder. Like if I had looked, someone would have been standing at the edge of the bed. Also, the fact that my cat reacted the way that he did, I don't know. I don't think it was in my head. I think that there was something in my room. So in case anyone has heard or experienced something similar to this happened around 2005 to 2009 in San Diego, California. I don't quite remember exact age at the time, but it happened when I was probably like 9 to 12 years old. So, it was a boring night, so my mom, little sister, and I decided to go to Walmart just to get out of the house. This particular Walmart shares the same parking lot as a Kohl's or Target, and as we are walking around in our PJs in the store, a lady approached us and complimented my sister and I for being so cute and pretty. She proceeded to say that she works for a TV network, and her job is to scout or cast families for their reality show. She asked if our dad was in the store with us, and even though we didn't have a dad, I lied and said that he's at home for my mum who doesn't speak English. I didn't want to say that he was in the store in case she would ask to speak to him or whatever, but the lady, who looked quite normal, friendly, and kind of bubbly, continued to compliment my family for being beautiful. As she was talking, I translated it, and we all felt flattered but skeptical by her compliments. Then she said that she would love to cast us if we would follow her to her house so that she could properly film everything to submit to the company. This was the moment that I started averting my eyes to check the shelves for hidden cameras. During this time, family reality and prank shows were pretty popular, so it made the whole situation feel a bit more plausible that we were either really being scouted or this was a hidden camera prank. I was leaning towards it being a prank because we were 1, boring people, and 2, weren't particularly so pretty and beautiful as she claimed. Even though I was young and so didn't feel an immediate danger talking to her in the middle of Walmart, with my mum present, mind you, I knew that it was ridiculous to follow a stranger to their house, especially at night. I then politely declined her offer, which she asked a few more times before telling us that if we changed our mind, we could find her in the store. When she left, we checked up and down the aisles for camera crews or hidden cameras because her whole reality show pitch to a first-gen Asian immigrant family just really seemed unbelievable, and we honestly thought that it could only be a prank. I also noted to my mum how it was odd that we didn't even notice her following us earlier when we walked every aisle, and she just came out of nowhere, it seemed. As a kid who watched a lot of true crime and forensic shows, Forensic Files and CSI, I told my mum, what if she was trying to lure us into a trap or something? Like when we follow her home, there could be more men there, and what if they kill or traffic us or something? I mean, we were probably easy targets since we were only 3 women, 2 being kids and immigrants. My mum also thought that it was weird, but instead of going straight to our car, we waited for some time to pass in case the lady or her people would follow us to our car and our home. To this day, sometimes this encounter would creep its way out of my memory bank, and it always makes me wonder, What if we did follow her? What if we actually went with her that day? What did she actually have planned for us? Was she one of those bad women that you hear about working with others in order to lure other women and children away? Has she done this before, and was she successful with other people? Or was it just honestly a complete innocent invitation? I really do hope that nobody was harmed from her scheme, but something tells me that she was up to no good. I was 15 years old, living in a medium-sized city in North Florida, about 60,000 people, but some areas were really spread out and rural. Don't think of it like New York City or anything, but more like a lot of houses spread out over a huge area and condensed shopping centers. But I was a bit of a punk that my parents had a hard time controlling at the time, so that meant that I basically snuck out constantly and was always riding my bike around the city all hours of the night with my friends, fighting and constantly causing trouble. For reference, I was probably 5'10" and 150 pounds. My next-door neighbors, they were my best friends. Their names were Nick and Tim. Nick was younger than us and about 5'5" and 140 pounds. Tim was 5'8" and easily 210 though. Nick and Tim were brothers only a year or so apart. On that night, Tim had texted me around 1 a.m. asking me to ride bikes with him and his brother to his girlfriend's house so that he could get lucky. I remember being hesitant because of how long the bike ride was. I just looked it up and it was like 10 miles from my house to her street. But Tim, he begged and begged me until I just agreed. Our city had a curfew, meaning that any police in the area that saw you and assumed you were a minor would stop you and possibly issue you a ticket and bring you home. That meant that we had to be careful about being seen by cars going by. Well, the bike ride to her house went by without any issues. We took our time, joked around, smoked a little bit, and we genuinely just enjoyed the ride together. We ran out of what little weed that we had on the way and finally got to his girlfriend's house. After what felt like an hour, Tim snuck around the back to go in, and Nick and I just sat on an electrical box and talked. Maybe 30 minutes went by, and Tim triumphantly snuck out of the house bragging about his time in there, and says that we should head out. Annoyed, though, at how long it took and nearly sober, we both agreed. The first mile of the ride went by smoothly, but then things just changed. You see, we had just passed a decent-sized shopping center, closed, and a church. We rode by it slowly in zero rush. After we passed it, it led to a long stretch of road with woods and canals on each side. It had 2 lanes on each side, separated by palm trees and landscaping in the middle, sidewalks on both sides, and on the right side another road connects to the parkway. We were riding on the right-hand sidewalk, and off in the distance we saw a very tall older man wearing a yellow raincoat and a large backpack. He was walking back and forth on the sidewalk under a streetlight on the corner of the parkway and the side street. We all went silent as we got closer. I don't think he could have seen or heard us, as there were no lights over us and there were sprinklers going off in the median that sort of muffled the noises. But I remember hearing him dragging his feet across the ground and mumbling. He was dragging his feet almost like he was trying to brush away the concrete to find something underneath it or something. The mumbling was incoherent and frantic, and honestly, it made my heart sink and my stomach knot up a bit. I couldn't understand anything that he was saying, and the only way to go and get home was to go by him. Nick said, "Yo, let's cross the street and get onto the other sidewalk." Tim and I agreed. I remember this so distinctly too, because we crossed the landscape median and a jet of sprinkler water hit me directly in the face and got me into my mouth and my eyes, and it smelled like sulfur and tasted horrible. But on the other side, we could hear the mumbling and the scraping of his feet clearer. I could now see more details about him, and he was smoking a cigarette and was probably 6'5", had on a huge green backpack, was extremely skinny, had long grey hair, was wearing combat boots and blue-ripped jeans, and he also had a full white beard. He didn't seem to notice us until we were directly across from him. We all had our eyes locked onto his direction when he suddenly stopped walking, talking and scraping his feet, looked up from the ground, and let out what I can only describe as the most god-awful screech that I had ever heard. It was like he tried to say 100 words at once. None of us knew what he tried to say, but after the initial scream, I could make out, "What the F are you doing?" It startled us. I mean, we were now 25 yards away from him when he screams, "What are you looking at?" I was a foolish teenager. I piped up to saying something smart, and Tim riding next to me grabbed onto me and said, "Don't say anything." So I didn't, and in hindsight, I'm actually really glad that I didn't. He kept screaming in our direction, and we kept riding. The further we rode, the fainter the screaming got, and then it stopped. We crossed the street again to the other side and made it about a mile down the road, all of us on edge now. We glanced over our shoulders constantly to make sure that he wasn't following us. We talked briefly about it, how strange it was, etc., but we were glad that it was over with. Or so we thought at least. Now, Nick and Tim were riding in front of me when I thought that I heard something behind me. I turned around and there he was, maybe only an arm's length away from me, headed directly for me. The yellow raincoat hood was pulled up over his head and buttoned now. This guy was standing up on his mountain bike, pedaling as hard as he could. We locked eyes and he started screaming at us. I mean, absolutely screaming at the top of his lungs. He screamed, not words, not any language, but just a constant scream as loud as he could. I have chills writing about this even now as a 25-year-old grown man with a wife and a kid. If someone ever illustrated that image and I saw it, I probably would have a panic attack, to be honest. But I screamed he's right behind us, stood up pedaling as hard as I could. I think we all did. And he was right behind us the whole time, screaming. Every so often, too, he was practically on top of us, screaming and trying to knock us off our bikes. I don't know how long we rode with him behind us like that, but it felt like forever. I think age played a factor, though, because he must have got tired and let us get ahead a bit. Exhausted, we pulled into a neighborhood and started cutting through yards trying to lose him. We jumped off our bikes and all just decided that if he's still chasing us, we're going to make our stand together and fight. It was honestly like a hive mind decision too, all too tired to keep running. It was just our only option, really. So we stood there and we waited for him, but he just never came. I don't even remember hearing him. I still can't recall when we actually lost him too. In any case, I called my house phone, waking both my parents up in the process, and told my dad about the situation. He told me to get home and then they'd figure it out. I asked to talk to my mum and she yelled at me on the phone and refused to come and pick us up as I stood in the middle of the street, hoping that this crackhead didn't come and kill us all. I get home eventually with Nick and Tim in tow, and they asked if they could crash in my room. Of course, I said yes. I wasn't about to send them back out there. We all still had some really weird feelings about that night, and I guess we just never really spoke about it again after that. I don't know why that was, but I also don't know what he wanted. He was most probably on drugs or something, but it makes me wonder if he would have robbed us or perhaps something worse if he had actually kicked us off our bikes.